Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. And tonight, I've got Austin Williams here. Me and him, we are going to be talking about our top 10 most important games for the 2023 college football season. We have not talked about college football in a long time because of the fact that it's the off season. And even though there is a lot of stuff, going on when it comes to the fact that you look at how you got college basketball, you've got the NBA, you've got a lot of stuff going on, but college football is actually getting kind of close again. It's only 2 months away. It's coming right around the corner, and now we're here to talk about our top 10 important games. What do you think about our topic tonight, Austin, and you're looking forward to it?
I, I'm looking forward to it as well because there's going to be a lot of intriguing games this upcoming year, this upcoming season. Because the league's I think as wide open as it's been in quite a while. In all honesty, because Georgia they lost a lot. They've got some questions at quarterback. Can Beck be the guy? People have said Bama their demise, which they've said that for years. Let's be honest. Is Ohio State legit? Michigan, we're going to find all that out now.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. I'm looking forward to the college football season as well. Around 60 days away, roughly, maybe a little bit less, depending on week 0. It's a little bit less than 60 days. Crazy. It's rapidly approaching. But like you said, potentially a wide open year. Maybe there's not, as dominant of a team like a Georgia that they might just Mac truck everybody again. Maybe Alabama, they've got some question mark, but will they get back to peak form with Saban? There's a lot of teams, but it's going to be really interesting to see which teams, are going to be toward the top, and we're going to be covering basically all those important teams and our most important games. To start out, we've got the honorable mentions. I've got a few of them. You've got a few of them. These are the games that are really important for this season that might actually have playoff implications, that might end up being, at the end of the day, one of the 10 most important games of the season, but we just don't know if they're that important right now, despite the fact that they're still really important games. But what is your list of honorable mentions, Austin, for the best games or the most important games of the 2023 college football season?
So, my honorable mentions, which me and Jeffrey, we also agreed on a lot of these honorable mentions as well. So the honorable mention, Notre Dame, Clemson, and the reason why that this one did not make the list is because when we go along, you will see that there's more significant games out there, and a lot of the reason why this game is intriguing for a lot of viewers is because Clemson got beat last year. Now, I know a lot of Clemson fans are saying, "Oh, there was a lot of fluky plays. Let's see if Notre Dame can run it back." Well, we're going to see this year. If they could do this again and beat Clemson again, we have ourselves something on our hands here. And then my second honorable mention was Texas, Oklahoma. And this is one of those that can, the old saying is Texas is back, baby. Woo! But and Oklahoma can they be better than 6-6? Can Brent Venables get this team back to peak form where they're going to New Year's Sixes and college football playoffs and championship games? That's to be seen. But this will be the last year in there in the Big 12, and this could be make or break. Because once you go to the SEC, let's be honest, it's not easy because you got to deal with the Georgias, the Bamas, the Texas A&M, the Auburns of the world. And those are not easy games to win by any stretch. Then speaking of the SEC, Bama, Tennessee. We all remember that game from last year. That was a classic. Hendon Hooker, Bryce Young. Many people say that was the game of the year last year. I tend to disagree. We'll get to that later on in our list because you'll see. No spoilers. But that game was a classic. And, I know Bama fans are like, if Bill O'Brien would learn how to run the ball some, Tennessee would have not won that game, which I agree with you, Bama fans. That was one of those head scratchers. Why don't you get a little closer? But at the end of the day, me or Jeffrey are not in that chair. We're not Nick Saban. We would love to be, but we're not. So, and we're not Bill O'Brien either. So we can't make that decision. And then my other honorable mention was Bama LSU. Can LSU and Brian Kelly win the big game once again? And we all remember the 2-point conversion, the fall in. If Mason Taylor doesn't fall in, Bama wins that game, and they're in the playoffs this past season. And then my fifth honorable mention is you cannot have an honorable mention without prime time, Colorado TCU, because it's prime time. There's a lot of hype around him. But yeah, those are my honorable mentions. I threw that Colorado in there. One is kind of a funny ha-ha. Nothing serious by that, guys.
Mm-hmm. I mean, hey, there's nothing wrong with it at all. The hype is real. Everyone's talking about it. But I think for sure we got to pump the brakes on the Colorado hype train. I mean, it's nice that Colorado's back in the conversation, but we're going to have to see, in my opinion, a year or two of Colorado before they're in the discussion for top 10 most important games. But definitely don't blame you for throwing that in there. It's Deion Sanders. Got to give him a mention. And I'm definitely looking forward to watching the Buffaloes this year. That should be a good game, but probably not, a game that decides a lot in the playoff race or New Year's Six, but still awesome for sure. My honorable mentions, I've got a lot of the games that you have for sure. I've got both of the Bama games that you mentioned as well, LSU and Tennessee. They arguably could be in the top 10 for most important games, but then it would be really Bama heavy, trying to mix it up, have different teams in there because of the fact that you want to have, more discussion about the different teams, different conferences, who's going to actually be able to maybe make a run for the playoff. Bama, if all four of those games are, that we potentially have, if Bama's in there the whole entire time. We've got a couple of Bama games in the top 10, but you got to have them in the honorable mention because LSU and Tennessee, both rivalry games for Alabama. They're going to be probably thrillers again like last year. Both those games last year were insanely good. Like you mentioned what happened in both those games. I mean, Alabama was this close to making the playoff last year. I mean, they were that close. They only 5 points that kept them away, and really only 2 or 3 because all they needed was one of those wins they'd have been in. But those games were great, and they should be great again.
Well, and mention your point, Jeffrey. The old saying is, it's a game of inches. It basically the LSU game, like I mentioned, not to cut you off, but that was basically a game. If he doesn't fall in, Bama more than likely wins that game, and then they beat Georgia. They're in. There would be no question.
100%. I mean, that's why we love college football, because stuff like that happens. And, the team that is expected or favored to win doesn't always win. That was a thriller of a game. And like I said, it should be a great game again. Another game on the honorable mentions, I have Ohio State and Penn State. That's a game that every single year is usually competitive. It's a solid game. But, Penn State hasn't beaten or really, put pressure on Ohio State in a while, in a couple, few seasons. So it's going to be a good game probably. Penn State has a lot of hype, but that's in the honorable mentions. Oregon, USC. It's a Pac-12 game. You talk about the top of the Pac-12. So even Steven, Utah, USC, Oregon, all those teams, Washington, are just so, close together and how good that they are. There's not really a team that you say, oh, that team's way better than that other team in the Pac-12. They're very even, so there should be some great games. But Oregon, USC just found its way in the honorable mention, but could be a game that decides a lot for the Pac-12 championship title game and also the college football playoff. Notre Dame, Clemson, that's going to be a good game as well. You talked about last year, Notre Dame beat Clemson. It could be a fantastic game again. Will Clemson get revenge this time around? And then Texas, Oklahoma. That one I wanted to put in the top 10 so badly because, it's probably going to be the best game in the Big 12. You could have TCU, you could have Kansas State. Those teams could be really good again, but it's Texas, it's Oklahoma. Like you said, is Texas finally back? As Sam Ehlinger said a few years ago in that bowl win over Georgia. I don't know if Texas is going to be back. Steve Sarkisian has a lot to prove. He has to prove that he can finally coach a team to 9 or 10 wins. If Texas is that good, this could be a really important game. But if Texas is another 8-4 team yet again, probably why it should be in the honorable mentions for now, but should be a great game. So that's our honorable mentions for the top games of the 2023 college football season. They should all be great games. I'm looking forward to them a lot. But to Austin's point, he told me before we got on, we're going to talk about the criteria. For our top 10 games, The criteria is very important. We're talking about games that you're probably having these teams that are going to be at the top in the title discussion, maybe make the college football playoff as well. All these games are going to be very important, but you can explain further, Austin, if you would like, about our criteria for these games and why they're in the top 10.
Sure thing, Jeffrey. So when we put this list together, we kind of took a page out of our good buddy, our good friend over at the Voice of College Football. Shout out to Mark Rogers, the GOAT of college football talk shows. But the criteria that we kind of came up with was, and you'll see a lot going through this, is this team going to be a championship team? Is this team going to be competing for the national title towards the end of the year? That's very important because you won't see teams like, for instance, you won't see the Baylors, the Iowas, those kind of teams of the world. TCU, we expect them to take a big regression back, so to speak. So that's more than likely the criteria on that. And New Year's Sixes is also very important to us as well because those are some of the major bowl games. Because for the teams that, aren't a college football playoff or national championship team, they have the New Year's Six to fall back on, which are still very important for your program. Because that's a big stepping stone. I mean, that's a major stepping stone for someone like a Tulane, like what they did last year against USC. That was a major stepping stone for them. Can they repeat it again? We'll have to find out. And another thing that we took into consideration was conference titles and division titles. Like the conferences that still have divisions like the SEC and the SEC and the Big Ten, excuse me. They still have divisions. So, there's still a lot of people in the West that can win it. More likely it'll be Michigan, Ohio State again, per normal. But you never know. Someone could sneak up out of the West, like a Wisconsin or something along that nature. And then the conference championship, are you a conference championship team? Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Bama, Georgia. That's kind of the criteria we use when making this. And that's to help explain a lot of where we put these teams and where we put these games. Without further ado, though, take it away, Jeffrey.
Great explanation for sure. And I mean, overall, again, looking at all these games, a lot of them are going to be very easy to explain because these teams are definitely self-explanatory. Before we get to number 10, though, thanks everyone for being here. Let's get up to a few of the comments that you guys have. The Ohio State, thanks for being here. This is another SEC team will probably win it all again. I mean, hey, you look at the last 20 to 22 championships or whatever. It's like 19 of the last 22 national champions have been from the SEC. That's a pretty good assumption via Ohio State, but you never know. Maybe the Big Ten, maybe another conference can get it done. But like you said, via Ohio State probably would think as of now be the SEC. Troy V, thanks for being here. Says Georgia must have lost a bunch, but are stacked nonetheless. I mean, yes, Georgia has lost a ton of talent, but they just keep rebuilding and reloading. But yes, you are right. Troy V lost a lot. They have some question marks, though. Something they haven't had the last couple of years. We'll have to see how good they are. The Ohio State has some tough road games this season. We got the Buckeyes fans in chat for sure. Appreciate you guys for being here. Troy V being bullish as Buckeyes running the table this year. That's bold. That is completely bold because you talk about like the Ohio State has right here. Ohio State at Notre Dame, at Purdue, at Wisconsin, at Michigan, etc. Those are some tough games. It'll be very difficult for them to do that, but you just never know. Really appreciate Jeff for being here as well. We've got Bama fans in representation as well. Roll Tide, he says, and thanks for Rayleigh Creative Travel for being here also. Howdy, y'all, Roll Tide. So we've got really just Bama and Ohio State fans here, and they're represented in this top 10. And without further ado, the number 10 game that we have, most important games for this season, Ohio State at Notre Dame. So Ohio State is already on the list at number 10. I've got on their Buckeye trap game because even though I know Notre Dame is a team that has not really proven themselves whatsoever when you talk about being able to win the big game or can they compete at the top of college football, this is at Notre Dame, and that is still a tough place to play, even though they did, unfortunately, lose to Marshall and Stanford at home last year. I do think Notre Dame will avoid that this time, and they were able to beat Clemson last year at home. So Notre Dame does show up for the big game, you would say, at home. This could be a really interesting game. It's a night game as well. What are your thoughts on this game, Austin?
This game here is really intriguing because you look at the schedules for both sides, for the Buckeyes and Notre Dame, for the Buckeyes and Irish. For Notre Dame, this is going to kind of set the tone for their season because more likely we expect Notre Dame to start 3-0. I think everyone would agree on that we expect them to start 3-0. They shouldn't be the Notre Dame of Marshall, Stanford. If they win this game, if Notre Dame wins this game, and they could somehow beat either USC or Clemson, we could be looking at a playoff team, especially if Sam Hartman plays his best football. Notre Dame's always had a solid defense. This truly could be, for Notre Dame, a big win to set them off in the right way. Now, for the Ohio State perspective of this, that not a lot of people realize is if Ohio State loses this, their season is essentially on the line when they go to Penn State. When Penn State comes to them, pardon me. And if Penn State beats them, guess what? No playoffs, more than likely. Now, there's always that rare chance that they could end up like LSU last year, where they still had a chance because of all the conference title game. There's always that chance, but more than likely, you lose 2 games, your season's basically over at that point. Basically. There's always that slight chance. But this is an important game for Ohio State, and they lost a lot as well. They brought back Marvin Harrison Jr. He's back, which is a big piece. But they have questions at quarterback because C.J. Stroud's not back there anymore. He's in Houston now. He's over there riding the bull in Houston, so to speak. So we're going to see, can Ohio State's quarterback play be elite like it has in the past? And can it hold up against that tough, rugged Notre Dame defense? And I think that this game right now is 50-50 as we sit tonight.
I completely agree with basically everything that you said for sure. You hit the nail on the head. Thanks for being here as well. Jacob says Tennessee's winning the national title. So he's bullish on the Volunteers. You never know. But, I mean, that would be insane if the Volunteers could get the job done there. But thanks for stopping by. Rayleigh Creative Travel said the Ohio State-Notre Dame game will be tougher and closer than predicted. And Rayleigh's not buying Jacob's prediction of Tennessee winning the whole thing there. He wants them to get tested out. And then Troy V, we appreciate you, Jacob. Again, Tennessee, it's not as crazy as saying Colorado primetime winning it all. That's not as crazy as that. But Troy V says Buckeyes will have one of the best D's in the Big Ten. Notre Dame might have a quarterback, but who is he throwing to? And that's a great point, Troy V, that I was going to bring up talking about this game. 100% agree with you. Sam Hartman is the key, though, because Notre Dame has not really had a quarterback that could test the defense in a while. You know, you talk about Ian Book. You talk about, even maybe Tyler Buckner's. While Alabama might have some question marks depending on how he can play. I think Tyler Buckner definitely has more upside than like a player like Ian Book. But Notre Dame has had a lot of quarterbacks lately that are solid, but they just can't really stretch the defense. They can't really do things that make the defense, really worried about that player. Sam Hartman is capable of, blowing the top off the defense with great throws. But like you said, Troy V, Notre Dame's receiving core, while it has talent, it's not as good as some of these other top teams in college football. So if Ohio State's defense can shut down Notre Dame's receiving core, it could be game over for Sam Hartman because he's going to have a lot of pressure on because Ohio State's D-line is usually good. So that's the key for Notre Dame. They have to protect Hartman, and the receiving core has to help him out. And if they get the job done there, with this being a
Now,
home game, I could see Notre Dame pulling this off. And if, like you said, Austin, if Notre Dame does win, it gives them a legitimate chance to make the playoff, because if they split the USC Clemson games and win the rest of them, they're probably in, you would think, more than likely, depending on other scenarios, at 11-1. So this is a very important game for them, and for Ohio State, it's important as well, because of the fact you lose this one, you could be in some trouble if you drop another game to the Big Ten and you're out of the playoff discussion.
now, one thing I want to mention before we move on, I would like to point out the fact Notre Dame has always relied on their run game.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder how Ohio State's going to hold up to that, because we saw, sorry Ohio State fans, but Michigan, they basically ran on that defense, and then look, J.J. McCarthy could throw to a wide open receiver, tight end, and bada boom, bada bing, the scoreboard looks larger than it actually should be. And that's one of the key things that makes this interesting, because what if Notre Dame does that? Take the Michigan approach, or take like a Penn State approach, run the ball, and then Ohio State's like, okay, we're going to take that away. And then Sam Hartman, who could stretch the field more than, like you said, Jeffrey, like the Ian Books and the Tyler Buckners of the past, he could stretch that defense. He can make that defense think. Is he going to go play action, shotgun? Well, you just don't know. And that's what makes it so intriguing, because Ohio State defense can be suspect sometimes.
Yeah, I agree with you, Austin. I mean, you're 100% correct. I mean, the key is, again, for Notre Dame, is they have to protect Hartman, and he's going to have to be able to have his receivers make big plays. That's how you beat Ohio State. You have to be able to throw the ball down the field. Like you said, Michigan did that. They were able to establish a bit of a run game, and then J.J. McCarthy threw the ball over the top, and that's how they were able to win the game. But the thing with Ohio State is they do usually have a good D-line, but I do think that Notre Dame will be able to run the football a little bit in this game, but it has to be enough to create, that the ability for the offensive line to say, hey, we're able to protect the quarterback long enough, because the defense is worried about the run, because it does gain yards. If you're not gaining yards in the run game, you shut that down, then the passing game is going to completely fall apart. So Notre Dame, I think that their margin for error in this game is very slim, but they can win. And that's what makes this game very important, because both of these teams are potentially able to make the playoffs. A loss here could completely detriment either team's season, specifically Ohio State potentially, with Michigan looming large, maybe Penn State. If they're losing this game, maybe they're not able to beat those teams. Who knows? But I will say that it's a very important game. It's why we have it number 10 on our list, and we'll be looking forward to this game for sure. But I'm with you, Austin. If I had to say right now, I maybe would lean Ohio State right now, but it's about 50-50 for sure. This is going to be a fantastic game. Now on to number 9. We've got the neutral site rematch from last season. It was a thriller game. You had Florida State and LSU. That was a great game last year, and it should be a great game again this year. And I know that some of you guys probably would say, is Florida State and LSU two teams that are legitimately going to be playoff teams? That is the argument against this game. But the winner of this game, the upside is there for them to possibly be a playoff team, which is why we do have it on the list at number 9. Plus, it should be a great game like last year. What are your thoughts on this game, Austin? The rematch of this neutral site thriller from last season.
So, I want to ask the chat of you a quick question, Jeffrey. Going back to last year's game, do you believe if LSU makes that extra point and we go to overtime, do you believe the outcome's different? Do you believe LSU goes down the field and wins in overtime?
That's a great question. I mean, watching that game, I mean, neither team was really that dominant, but I would say probably not as likely. Probably not. I mean, it definitely wouldn't have been as easy for them to win that game. But, overall, I think that, both of these teams have certain things going their way here. Like if you win, then you maybe will have a shot to do big things, because you look at Florida State, you've got Jordan Travis back. And a lot of people, you talk about top tier quarterbacks this year in the upcoming season, whether you're talking about Caleb Williams, or you're talking about Michael Penix, Bo Nix, etc. It's some of these top guys in college football. Drake May, Jordan Travis is kind of entering that conversation. A lot of people are high on him, and he's back. In Florida State, yes, they're losing some talented players, but they have gotten a lot of players through the transfer portal. They have one of the best transfer portal classes this year, which is going to make a big difference for them, I think this season. And I think it's going to really help their cause. And then you talk about LSU. You've got Jade Daniels. He's back. I know some people don't really think he's an elite quarterback, but he did show at times that he was capable of more than what he provided at Arizona State because he did have more talent around him. So, and the only thing that's against LSU is they'll be playing in the rugged SEC again. Even if they win this game, they might not be a playoff team, but it would give them a chance to be a playoff team if they do win this game. It's going to be really interesting for sure. I mean, again, it sounds like a cop-out answer, but this feels like another 50-50 game here, just like last year. It could be a coin flip either way. I mean, you almost want to lean Florida State. You almost do because of how good that they are looking on paper. Paper doesn't win games. It's a week one game as well, which makes it harder to project because it's the first game of the year. You don't know how good these teams are going to be right out of the gate. But Florida State's looking really good.
I would like to say regarding this game, we should mention this is prime time. This is week one. This is going to be, not to steal the NFL's logo, but this is Sunday Night Football, 7:30 ABC. The lights are on bright. And the question is, who's going to show up? Because let's be honest. Brian Kelly in big games, more often than not, I think most would agree, it tends to not show up. Like last year against Bama, a lot of people counted him out. He won. And people said, look, he can win the big game. Sure, but can he do it on a consistent basis? Well, that's yet to be determined because then look what happened a week later. They almost lose to Arkansas, and then Texas A&M basically put any hope of the college football playoff out of their reach. But that's beside the point. Beside the point, so to speak. And, LSU's got a lot of players returning. Jaden Daniels is back. He's one of those quarterbacks that either you're high on him or you're not. You either have him near your top 15 or you don't. But he had a great year at Arizona, a couple great years at Arizona State, and then he had that one bad year, and it's like people are sluggish on him. He had a good year at LSU. We'll have to see. LSU's got some things going for him. I think Brian Kelly could get this team back to form. But the thing that worries me, there's a lot of hype. Jordan Travis, can he win the Heisman? Is he the next great quarterback to come out of Florida State? But the thing that worries me is Florida State going to actually be consistently good? Because what if last year was one of those anomalies? What if they show up to this game and it's like LSU runs them off the field 31-10, something like that, and then people are going to say, well, this ain't a playoff team. This team won't even beat Virginia in the ACC. Which that might be a little much, but you get my point. They've been inconsistent at times, and that's what worries me about Florida State. They've got all the talent there, and I'm like you, Jeffrey. I agree with you. This is one. I know it's a cop-out answer, but I'm 50-50 because this is neutral site. No one's got the advantage nowhere. They're not in Baton Rouge. They're not in Tallahassee. They're a neutral site. I believe it's in New Orleans, I think.
I think if I remember,
or is it in Orlando?
This one is in Orlando. See the thing, that's a good point you bring up. And this is another thing that you could say could maybe help Florida State possibly because last year's game was in New Orleans. So it was in LSU's backyard. And when watching that game, it seemed like there were more Florida State fans there. So, I mean, I think that overall, looking at Florida State, they have a shot to win here because they're going to probably have more fans, unless LSU does the exact opposite and they travel this time and there are more fans. I mean, there was a lot of LSU fans there, but Florida State really showed up. I think the thing that makes this tough is when you have one of these games like this where, you look at, is this an SEC and an ACC? Some people, I guess, would automatically assume that the SEC team is better. because it's the SEC, and I don't blame that logical thinking there, because the SEC has been the most dominant conference in college football for 2 decades, since probably 05. And LSU was a really good team last year. But like you said about Florida State being consistent, LSU wasn't very consistent last year either. You talk about, they beat Alabama, even though you can make an argument that it was a bit fluky at the end, but they still won. That was a great win. But then they got beat awfully by Texas A&M. And A&M was a 5-7 team, even though they've got a lot of talent. So I think this is one of those games where it's really hard to trust either team, because there's a lot of new talent there, like for a lot of teams. Because the transfer portal, the advent of the transfer portal makes this so much different than it used to be, because all these teams are reloading essentially every year. Florida State's got a lot of new players. LSU's got new players. So we don't know how they're going to adjust in a week 1 game. This is why this type of game is almost impossible to predict. It's about a 50-50 game. I almost would lean Florida State right now, just because, again, on paper, they look really, really good. And I don't know if that this game is actually going to have college football playoff implications. That's why we only have it at number 9. But this should be an epic game, a fantastic week 1 opening game. Like you said, at night as well. Florida State could have the better crowd. Should be a fantastic game. But regardless, if these two teams are as good as people are thinking, especially Florida State, it could have some playoff implications. But it's going to be really interesting.
And I would like to bring up – I would like to bring up to Troy V's point in the comments about how this is a huge week 1 game for both teams on the previous slide, and how there's going to be some huge mistakes being made, which that could be a very big possibility too. This game could be played, and it could be 3 turnovers apiece, and it could basically be who makes the mistake last. You just never know. Like you said, Jeffrey, it's week 1, anything can happen. Now, if they played in week 8 and we knew more about them possibly, then we could be like, oh, yeah, LSU's the better team. They should win this game. Because it's week 8. They got Bama, let's say, on the mind next week. They got this. But since it's week 1, the possibilities are unlimitless.
Oh, I completely agree, and that's great. Great point that you brought up, Troy V's comment. You're absolutely right, Troy V. And again, the mistakes are going to be key, because of the fact that you look at Georgia Clemson a couple years ago. That game is a perfect example of a week 1 overreaction. You talk about Georgia, I think they beat Clemson like 16-10. And Georgia had no offense in that game. Clemson had no offense, which they ended up not really having offense the entire season. And they struggled because they barely beat Georgia Tech, and they had a rough season, even though they still won 10 games. For them, it was a rough season. But Georgia won the national title that year. And Georgia scored 16 points in that week 1 game. If that's a later game, like week 8, week 9, like you mentioned with this game, Georgia's beating Clemson by a lot because they were the better team, but they struggled in week 1. That's why these games like this, I like these games, because it just puts you right back in the atmospheres of college football. It's great to have these fantastic games in week 1. The problem is that these teams aren't ready for these games. You never are. It doesn't matter how much you practice. It doesn't matter until you get on the field with these new players, sometimes new coaches. Sometimes you have new assistant coaches out there, offensive defensive coordinators, all that kind of stuff. You never know how your team's going to perform. So, to Troy's point, most teams are probably going to make a lot of mistakes, and we're not going to really know how good either of these teams are, and really any of these teams, until week 4, week 5, like every single year. And that makes a game like this even tougher to predict.
Which to your point, before we move on to number 8, it's one of those things, too. There's also the argument of why don't you play these later in the year? Like you've made a couple times. I believe I've made that statement. But once again, though, the committee punishes you for that, which we can go another 30 minutes just on that sentence. But like this game here, if LSU was to play like Nicholas State in week 1, and then the committee would be like, oh, you didn't play nobody until you played Bama and the Arkansas of the world in conference. Your non-con was terrible. And it's like, why are you punishing us for that? We wanted to play these teams. But week 1 games are always fun. And most of the time they do deliver. There's some that just, you look at them and go, not really. Nope, never mind.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, obviously they do these type of games because they're attention grabbers. It's, to get people back in sync of watching these games. You don't want to just have terrible games like LSU versus, like you said, Nicholls State in week 1, and that's all that you got. All these teams are playing, the bottom of the barrel teams. Nothing against those teams. It's awesome that they get a chance to be on national TV. But they're not competitive games. It's great to have these type games, but it shouldn't be fair that you really get punished for them that much because of the fact that you're not really how good you're going to be by the end of the season. The only good thing about week 1 games, though, you do have a chance to recover. You could lose this game, like LSU, for example. LSU, if they lose this game and then they find a way to run the table but lose one more game like in the middle of the season, they could get in with 2 losses because you remember LSU did that last year. LSU had 2 losses. We were talking about them making the playoff potentially last year, but then they lost A&M. And then they were not able to beat Georgia either, so that completely destroyed their chances. Auburn that one year had 2 losses, and they were going to make the playoff, but then they lost to Georgia in the SEC championship game. So LSU, this is a game for LSU that they don't have to win to make the playoff. Florida State has to win this game. That's what makes it more interesting for them. If they lose this game, they're probably done. Unless they run the table. LSU can drop this game and still make the playoff if they only lose once more. So at least with early games, you don't get punished as badly. But like everybody's saying, Jeff is bullish on LSU. He says LSU will win that. Maybe they will. Again, they've got a lot of talent. Florida State, can't count them out. But everybody's saying that this should be the best week 1 game, and I tend to agree. There's going to be a lot of great games. North Carolina, South Carolina, some other sneaky games. Florida, Utah could be good again. But this game is the premier, hopefully it is anyway, the premier week 1 game, Florida State LSU, and we are definitely looking forward to it. Take it away, Austin. On to our number 8 game here. It features the Seminoles again.
So coming in at number 8, Florida State and Clemson as the headliner of the title, an ACC title showdown. Could we be in for a little preview in Charlotte? Could we see an ACC title game possibly in the making in Death Valley? Who knows? It's week 4, Florida State had played LSU week 1. If Florida State wins that game, let's hypothetical here. Florida State wins that game, this game could mean a whole lot more because they go and beat Clemson. The sky's the limit because who else in the ACC is going to challenge them?
Mm-hmm.
I know that's the thing. But if they lose, there's not all hope lost because, like you said, Jeffrey, that they could still recover because they win this, they can still win the conference. And with 1 loss, if they happen to run the table, who knows the possibilities? They could end up at the 4. But what are your thoughts on this game, Jeffrey?
I mean, this game right here has the makings to potentially be like one of the first, ACC conference games in a long time that you're like actively anticipating because the ACC has been down lately across the board. You talk about it's been Clemson's conference. That's what people have said for the last decade, essentially. And there have been teams that have come close to competing at times, but you can't really say that there's been a legitimate second, top ACC team that consistently competes. And it doesn't even have to be the same team. There just isn't really a team coming into the season and say, oh, that's the team that's going to compete with Clemson. That's the team that could beat Clemson. Yeah, you had Syracuse beat Clemson. You've had Clemson drop games in the past that they shouldn't have. But those weren't games at the beginning of the season that you're like, oh, Clemson could lose that game. This is a game they could lose. Florida State, again, we really do not know how good they're going to be because of the fact that they have all these transfers and it's, are they legitimate? Are they actually going to be really good? Is Jordan Travis going to possibly even get even better from this past season? If he does, and if Florida State can prove like that they're, you don't want to use the Texas terminology that they're back, like to the Jimbo Fisher and previously before that days when Florida State was a lot better. But Florida State could be really good this year. And they have the quarterback experience advantage. You talk about Clemson. They got Cade Klubnik, but he's young. He hasn't played a lot. And he could, based on what we saw of him, he showed flashes of brilliance in the little bit of time that he was able to play last year. So he could just be fantastic. And he could be one of the top quarterbacks in college football for all we know this year. And we're not putting him there yet because he's not experienced enough to compare him with Bo Nix and Michael Penix and other quarterbacks with experience. But Florida State can win this game based on their experienced quarterback, the fact that they had a great year last year. And if they beat LSU, they know they'll have a great shot to make the playoff. If they win this game, I'm not saying they're guaranteed because you never know. They could drop 2 other games out of nowhere. You just never know. But Florida State would have a great shot to make the playoff. And Clemson, if they lose, they're not done because they could run the table, win the rest of their games. But it's going to make it a lot harder on them because they've got some other tough games as well. It's not going to be a slam dunk. But this is a game that if I had to say right now, I still – not official prediction. Mine can change by the time we see these teams in the season, but I'll probably lean Clemson just because of the fact that they've been the ACC's best for the last 10 years. You just can't really trust Florida State enough yet. But this game could be a thriller, could have a lot of, results on the line, potential repercussions throughout the rest of the season. Like whoever loses this game could really hurt their chances making the playoff, maybe even making the ACC title game if a North Carolina or some of the team can take that away from either of these two teams. But this should be a really good game. I'm probably going to lean Clemson right now, but I'm really looking forward to this game. You got any final thoughts on this one?
Well, yeah, I have a couple. So one thing I would love to point out is that a lot of people don't recognize this, but going to Clemson and winning is hard. Like take it from a Louisville fan. We went up to Clemson in 2016. Take y'all a little story real quick. We had one of the best seasons we had. We had Lamar Jackson, baby. Whoop, whoop. And that was his Heisman year. And we battled Deshaun Watson. We were darn near the playoff rankings with Clemson. We went to Death Valley, and if Lamar – and we had so many penalties. We had a couple turnovers. That was one of the worst games I think we played all year. That Clemson crowd, they get into it. Like, Clemson wins a lot of their games, especially when it's a big game and it's at home. Clemson thrives on it. And I think Florida State, this is going to be their first – this is going to be a true road test for them. Because, like we said, LSU is neutral site. Nobody has an advantage, even though it's in Florida. Probably more fans will show up for Florida State. But it's neutral site. But this is going to be a true road test. Can they go into Death Valley? Can they beat Dabo? Can they establish, hey, we're here to stay. We're here to make the statement that Jordan Travis is going to make the statement. I'm the Heisman favorite. Move over. We're taking the ACC back again. Can they do that? And the thing that interests me, and this is an interesting question for the chat and you as well, Jeffrey, do we particularly see this as a high-scoring game, or do we consider this one of those games that could be in the low 20s, in your opinion?
I mean, that's a great question. I mean, this is a Week 8 game. So, or a Week 4 game. Sorry, excuse me, 8 on the list, but it's a Week 4 game. So there's going to be both these teams are going to have some games under their belt. It's not going to be way in the season like a Week 8 game, but it's Week 4. So both these teams should have ironed out some of their kinks. But I will say though that you can look at this two different ways because both these teams have shown, based off Florida State last year and Clemson the last 10 years with Dabo Swinney coaching, and they've been really good. There's moments where Clemson's locked down on defense. And people sometimes really think of Clemson. They're a defensive team. They, smash mouth. They're going to make it a lower scoring game, almost like, the SEC back when we were kids, like Bama and LSU. Those type of games would be 21-17 at the most, type games. But Clemson also can get in a shootout. And their defense, I'm not saying it's not sometimes good. It's just that they can get in shootouts as well. Florida State last year, and really the last couple years, they've had some games where it's been lower scoring as well, but then they've also had games where they've been, like that Florida game that was like 41-38. Florida, was okay, and it was a rivalry game. Florida's going to give them than they got, but Florida State's defense didn't really shut down Florida. They found a way to win at the end. But I think that overall, looking at, these two teams, it's really hard to predict score. I mean, I think it's going to be close. Either way, whether it's a low or high scoring game, I think it is going to be a close game, but I could see it being a shootout, 45, 41 type game based off the fact that Clemson's got Kay Klubnik and he can put up points. And then Jordan Travis is really experienced. But both teams' defenses have talent, so it could be a lower scoring game because this is a Week 4 game, still earlier on in the year. That's a great question, Austin. That's a really good question. But I think it's going to be a good game regardless.
And to your point, Jeffrey, real quick, if I was to lean one way or another, this is honestly the one game that I'm kind of like, I would, if I was a betting man and I was to put a placement down now, I'm leaning towards Clemson just for the fact of home field. That may be enough, but I can honestly see, though, Florida State possibly going in there and winning. But right now, I'm leaning towards Clemson as we sit tonight.
I have to agree. Clemson's the team that we can trust more based on what they've done the last 10 years. And like you said, it is at home. To catch up on some of the comments, again, thank you guys so much for being in the chat. I really do appreciate it. Like the stream down below. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new. But Hummus Hero says, hello, Jeffrey, Austin, and friends in chat. It's nice to see you guys back. I'm looking so forward to the college football season. Troy V, he says back when we were talking about Florida State. LSU, he said Florida State has a way of being good on paper, being terrible on the field lately. So that can apply to this game as well. That's a really interesting take, Troy V. Then you've got Brock. Thanks for stopping by. Yeah, I think you're referencing my video on Alabama where he said Bama's not losing at home. I mean, I did say, again, go check that video out, guys, if you want to see it. But I did say that Alabama has a shot to lose a couple games. Could lose 2 road games. Maybe they could drop 1 at home. But Brock, he don't think that Alabama's going to lose a home game. Didn't necessarily say that, but I do really appreciate you for watching my video and stopping by on this stream as well. Thanks for being here. Also, Jackson. Troy V. also 2 losses, and you're not making the playoff unless everyone has 2 losses. That's a good point, Troy, but you do look at like the fact LSU was going to make the playoff with 2 losses this past season, more than likely, and then you talk about Auburn. So it's not impossible. You're referencing that everyone has 2 losses. It could happen on an outlier, but the unfortunate thing is, well, not kind of unfortunate depending on people's perspective, but that's going to go away based on the fact that 12-team playoffs coming around the corner, and there's going to be a lot of teams making it with 2 and 3 losses as well. That's really interesting for sure. Now to get back to this list of games, Austin, if you want to open up this game, we've got our first Pac-12 game. You've got Utah at Washington at 7.
Thank you very much, young Jeffrey. I will gladly take it from here, young sir. Yeah, my good assistant, my Batman. But anywho, on to this. At number 7, we have Utah at Washington, the Rising Penix Showdown, Week 11, time to be determined. So, I want to open this up as this is not at Rice Eccles. They're going to Washington. This game right here could arguably be the best game in the Pac-12. Like, this could be the best game. As we go along in this list, you will see. Spoiler alert, we got a couple more Pac-12 games upcoming. We won't tell you where. We'll leave that to your imagination. But Utah, Washington, Jeffrey, what are your overall thoughts on it? And if you had to lean one way or another at the moment, which way are you going?
Yeah, this is definitely hopefully the Rising Penix Showdown. This is a Week 11 game, so you would think that if Cam Rising is going to be healthy, or he'll be back by this game. There has been speculation that he might not be healthy. I don't know because I definitely have no information like that. Not in the rumor mill. Would assume Cam Rising will be available, but just taking all that out of account, if Cam Rising and Michael Penix are both playing, who has more upside? That's the interesting argument when talking about these 2 quarterbacks for both these teams. And that's not, they're obviously not the entire team. Quarterback's not the entire team. But the 2 quarterbacks are going to be really important in this game because of the fact you look at Cam Rising. He is a quarterback that can run. He can throw. He has so many different skill sets, and that's what makes it tough to stop. You look at, even though USC, don't want to upset any of the USC fans. We've got a lot of them for sure, but USC's defense last year was not that good. So you talk about Cam Rising and lift them up. But when Utah plays some teams that have better defenses, Cam Rising can struggle a little bit. He's not, turnover prone. Obviously, that Florida pass that he had at the end of the game, again, that was a Week 1 game, a lot different than doing it in the middle of the season. But that was a mistake. Cam Rising's not super mistake prone, but he is a quarterback that's capable of making a bad play or two every now and then. This game is on the road at Washington with a fantastic home crowd. Washington is one of the most underrated environments in college football, even though I don't really think a lot of people underrate it, but I still don't feel like it's talked about enough. When Washington's good, it is tough to play there. And this is week 11 as well. I know Utah, it's going to be cold, and I know Utah's cold as well, but it's going to be really cold up in Washington. But I think looking at the Huskies, is kind of the flip side, talking about quarterbacks. Michael Penix, when he has time to throw, is probably, you could make an argument, the best passer in college football. And I know that might be a bullish statement because there are a lot of great quarterbacks in college football. But when he's completely protected and he sees his guy to throw the ball to, Michael Penix is on the money usually every single time. The problem for Michael Penix is that when he's under pressure, he falls apart. He throws bad throws. He has picks. He has the history at Indiana where he would get hurt a lot, which Washington was very lucky that they protected him well enough last season that he did not suffer a season-ending injury like he did every single year at Indiana. Otherwise, Indiana might actually been even better with him. But I do think that, Michael Penix, if he's protected in this game, Washington should win. It's not that Utah isn't a great team. It's just it's going to be tough for them to go on the road and win anyway. But it's going to be later on in the year. Both these teams are going to probably be at their best potentially. And even though Utah has a good defense, Washington's offensive line was solid last year. If they could just protect Penix, I feel like Washington is going to win this game. Now, we obviously have no idea. I mean, I think it's going to be a really close game, but I would probably lean Washington right now. But, if Michael Penix got hurt or if Cam Rising got hurt by this time, which hopefully neither do, that could completely throw a wrench in that. But I would have to lean Washington right now, just based off the fact that I do think that he'll be protected enough and Penix will have a better game than Cam Rising. But this should be a great game, and it's definitely going to determine a lot in the Pac-12 title race. Maybe not for the CFP, but if either of these two teams are legitimately fantastic next year, or this upcoming season anyway, then, next year is this year, but, for the next season, I think that both these teams have the potential, to maybe go 11-1, 12-1 if they win the Pac-12 championship game and make the playoff. But the only detriment to the Pac-12 is they beat up on each other last year. If they beat up on each other this year again, no team's going to make the playoff like last year.
Now, I find this interesting, and this can be often found true in terms of this game right here. Are we going to get a offensive shootout like we got with Utah, USC, and Oregon, Washington to an extent? That was a shootout. Are we going to get this in this game? That's the biggest key because, Michael Penix, he's gotten a lot of hype coming into this year. He was, I think, predicted the third favorite to win the Heisman. And, for much as people disrespect him, Cam Rising, I will say it right now, is one of the 10 best quarterbacks in the entire college football right now. I truly believe that. He's one of the 10 best. He doesn't get a lot of credit because of the fact of who he plays for, and he's in the Pac-12, and he doesn't light up the stat board like Caleb Williams and Jordan Travis's of the world. He doesn't do that. He's the type of guy, I compare him to the type of guy, he's kind of like Tony Romo as an NFL comparison. He's not a guy that's going to beat you down the field. He's going to rely on that run game, and then he's going to throw the intermediates, and he's just going to make it nice and easy. But easy. And I think this is one of those games that's either I can either see this going one or two ways. Either this is a shootout and it comes down to who gets the ball last and kicks the game-winning field goal, or I could see one of the defenses, whether it's Washington or Utah, just absolutely tearing the other offense apart. Because the Pac-12's done that in the past, where people's expecting, this is going to be in the high 50s, and then you look at the scoreboard, and it's 38-14 in favor of whoever's playing, and it's like, wait a minute. They held them to 14 points? The Pac-12 doesn't play defense. Jeffrey, did you know the Pac-12 plays defense sometimes? Do you know that?
I do think some of these other teams play a bit better on defense than USC last year. But USC might be better this year on defense. They should be better anyway. So, yes, I agree with you, Austin. The Pac-12 can play defense. But I think to your point on this game, you mentioned Cam Rising being compared to Tony Romo in the NFL. Good comparison. Ironically for me, and this is completely out of left field, for me, I think Cam Rising is a better Peyton Ramsey. Peyton Ramsey, former quarterback in Indiana and Northwestern. Because they're both guys that aren't, elite quarterbacks with anything that they do. But they play hard, and they don't make too many mistakes, and they also can run. So I think that's the biggest thing when you're talking about Cam Rising. It's partly who he plays for, because Utah does get disrespected a lot because it's Utah. They're not, like a big name brand team like some of these other, like Oregon or USC. But it's also because of the type quarterback he is. He just doesn't wow you that much. And that's not a knock, because he's great. But Penix can't run as much anymore because he's torn his ACLs, twice, and he broke a collarbone. But the thing about Penix is he has the flashiness of he can throw the ball 70 yards down the field. But Cam Rising can't do that. He doesn't have the arm talent, or the arm, the velocity to be able to throw that ball that far down the field. He's got talent throwing it with the accuracy, but he just can't throw the ball that far. So I think that's why he just gets overlooked a bit. It's not saying that he's not good, because I believe, overall looking at Cam Rising, I would put him in the top 10. It'd be hard to compile a list just off the top of my head of the 10 quarterbacks. I mean, maybe you could say he's like 11th. I don't know. But Cam Rising is around that discussion. I think Penix is a little higher, especially when he's protected. But this is going to be a great game regardless. I'm looking forward to this game. It should be one of the top games in the Pac-12. That's why we put it on this list. It could decide a lot for the Pac-12 title race and also the playoff. But I would lean Washington right now. I don't know if you made your, who you're leaning right now on this game.
And one last thing before I make my prediction is Utah, they have, if you've looked at their schedule, woof. That is not an easy schedule. So
it's bad.
I don't know what the NCAA has against Utah. I don't know if they stole the candy from one of their children or if they, I don't know what they did, but that's not an easy schedule. And this right here could be Utah's season if they already have a loss by this point. But right now, not a lot of people discredit, say Cam Rising's not a big game player. When it comes to the big games, he's not there. I tend to disagree a little bit because the 2 USC games, he showed up, rise and shine, and I think he does it here. I think Cam Rising goes on the road, goes to Washington, and I'm leaning Utah at the moment. I think he shows why he's one of the best at his position. I think Utah. I'm leaning Utah right now.
Yeah, I mean that definitely could happen, Austin. I mean, I'm 100% with you. I mean, I'm much higher on Utah than some people are, but I will say, looking at Utah, they were overhyped last year, and I don't mean that in a negative way because Utah was really, really good last year, but there was a lot of people saying Utah was going to make the playoff. I never said that last year. I felt like Utah was probably going to be a 2 or 3 loss team. They lost 4 games because of the bowl game, but you look at Utah in the bowl game. Yes, Cam Rising got hurt and Penn State beat him, but that's not a knock on Cam Rising. He got hurt in that game, but Utah's been a team that they can show up to play, but like you said, they're much better at Rice-Eccles. It's one of those deals with Utah, and it's ironic because, yes, most teams are better at home. That's true. I mean, if you're better on the road, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but you should be better at home. The crowd's rooting for you. But Utah is drastically better when they're at home. Rice-Eccles, when you see Utah there, they're like 10 times better sometimes, it seems, than they are when they're on the road. Maybe not that drastic, but they can win on the road. But they're just a lot better when they're at home. Because I remember one game last year, I think it was either last year, maybe 2 years ago, Utah played at Washington State, and they did win that game, but it was like 21-17. And Washington State played pretty well in that game, but that shows you again, Utah is a bit sketchy on the road, and that's going to make it really tough for them to win this game because if Washington's playing at their best, I don't know. And like you said, they could be beat down by that schedule. You mentioned it. Utah's schedule is legitimately hard, and this is a Week 11 game. There could be some bumps and bruises. I mean, Utah was banged up last year. They had a lot of injuries when they played USC in the Pac-12 title game. That's why I wasn't shocked they won because again, USC's defense just completely laid an egg, and obviously Caleb Williams got hurt, which definitely ruined their chances. But Utah might be banged up here. And if they are, due to that schedule, Washington just seems to me right now like they would be the favorite. But I can see Utah winning. This should be a fantastic game. It should be.
I agree with you, Jeffrey. Mm-hmm. I agree with you. I could see this going the other way. I could see Washington winning. But on my gut feeling, I'm going to say Utah for the moment. But, anywho, on to number 6, good buddy.
Sounds great for sure. Both of our reasonings definitely make a lot of sense. Real quick, we got a lot of comments on this game. A lot of people are talking about the Pac-12, and with good reason. They've been a conference that's been forgotten about last few years, but they're back. The conference is back.
Pac-12 equals ratings.
Before you're losing USC and UCLA to the Big Ten. You're back this year. You're back. Hummus Hero says the Pac-12 so hard to predict 6 teams that are all solid. I'm assuming that the 6 teams that you're talking about, obviously Utah, Washington, USC, Oregon, and then Oregon State and UCLA. Pretty good as well. So I agree with you, Hummus Hero. For sure, Pac-12 tough to predict. Connor Johnson, he called out a Twitter troll request as hell. Rising will be ready. Okay. So definitely, that's why I didn't know for sure Cam Rising should be good. Thanks for clearing that up. Connor Johnson, appreciate you for being here as well, by the way. Jack says, to Jeff, I hate that Penix is getting a lot of disrespect of the pundits of ESPN. They obviously don't like the Pac-12 game. Penix's first round potential. And Troy V mentions also about, Rising as well. Basically, Jackson mentioned Utah disrespect. Basically, both these teams do get disrespected a lot by the national media. But it is what it is. Michael Williams, thanks for stopping by. Appreciate you for being here as well. Definitely appreciate all you guys for being in the comment section, watching the stream. Really do appreciate it. We also got the poll here. We're going to be getting to the top games. But in the poll question had, what game do you guys think is the most important game of the 2023 college football season? 45% of you guys say Ohio State, Michigan, 27% Alabama, Texas A&M, 9% Utah, USC, and 18% Georgia, Tennessee. So you guys are definitely split on the poll. Appreciate you guys for voting. We're not at the top games yet, so you guys can still vote there and see what you guys think is going to be the top game that we have for this season. But Utah, Washington should be great. But on to number 6. We've got the future conference showdown in the SEC, but for now it's still a non-conference game. Texas, we're back, and at Alabama, who the most dominant team in college football the last 15 years. Until the last 2 years, you do have the Georgia Bulldogs. They've been the most dominant team in college football last year, but Bama's still the standard for the last 15-plus years. Nick Saban, arguably the best coach all time, has got the most titles to prove it there. But Texas, this is a weird game because Texas gave everything that they possibly had last year, and they still lost the game. That game, and a lot of people, down south, right? In my area, you talk about people I talk to, more of them like Bama than Texas. And everybody in that game, they were like, okay, Bama just struggled a little bit, and they pulled out the game. I watched the game, and all I know is Texas, they were on the wrong end of the stick a couple times. Bama, they squeaked out of that one. That was a game Texas should have won. Like, literally, they should have won the game. And the fact that their quarterback got injured again, you talk about Quinn Ewers, who was playing his best football of his college career before he got hurt. After that, he was not playing as well toward the end of the season. Yeah. But before he got hurt, was lighting it up. Texas brought in Hudson Card, who's now at Purdue. He still played well, but Texas still lost by 1 point. This game's in Tuscaloosa, though. So Texas doesn't have the home field advantage. It's going to be a lot harder there. But I'm looking forward to this game. Should be great. Bama obviously going to be in the playoff discussion. Texas, if they are back and legitimately great this year, you never know, they could be as well. What are your thoughts on this one, Austin?
Now, this one here, number 6, this has some controversy to it. Because if you hear it from Texas's point of view, they will say the refs saved Bama. which that's a bad cop out. That's a bad cop out. I get that that's the easy cop out. Oh, it's the ref's fault. I get it sometimes. You get frustrated and want to say it's the ref's fault, but Texas, if you look at it, yes, they had that call that should have been safety, and they would have put them up in that game, but Texas also shot themselves in the foot as well. They had plenty of chances to win that. And let's give credit where credit's due. Bryce Young, with the game on the line, went right down the field, sets them up for the game-winning field goal, and Bama is still unbeaten. Mm-hmm. Now, this year, there is no Bryce Young. There is no heroics from Bryce Young. They've got a new quarterback, whoever it may decide to be, whether it's Buckner or whether it's Milroe, whichever way Nick Saban wants to go with that. And I think that's going to be very interesting because there's ups and downs with both quarterbacks. And this is the first time in a long time, if you think about it, that Nick Saban hasn't had a quarterback with the upside of greatness, if I'm saying that right or putting that in the right context. Because you look at the quarterbacks of past like Mac Jones, for instance. After he sat on the bench for a while, and he played. He was projected to go in the first round. Obviously Tua, Jalen. Then he went off to Oklahoma and finished second in the Heisman. Those quarterbacks. So it will be interesting. And if you look at this from Texas' perspective, is if they can win this game, the sky's the limit for them. It's just as long as they don't Texas it up, so to speak. Don't lose to like a BYU or somebody in the champ game or in the regular season. But this is an important game because this could decide some playoff standings, and plus Texas has got one more chance, just like Oklahoma, to win the Big 12. And Bama, with playing an SEC schedule, this could be a win that can help them convince the committee, hey, we're one of the 4 best. We need to be in here. But with all that being said and put into proper context, right now, I'm going to lean Bama right now. I just feel like they're in Tuscaloosa. That's a tough environment to win. It's a night game. And that's just one of those environments you just don't want to go in the nighttime and play. So I'm leaning Bama. What about you, Jeffrey? Which way are you leaning on this game and your overall thoughts?
Well, in the chat right here, I'm putting in, this is the link to my video that I made on Alabama's potential record for 2023. Made it a couple days ago. So if you guys would like to see that, check that out. Appreciate it. But talking about this game, something I said in that video, when you mentioned about Alabama not having, a quarterback that presumably has potential greatness, or like we know is like a great quarterback overall. I think that, looking at Tyler Buckner, he's not an elite quarterback, as we know. He hasn't really shown that ability yet. You never know. He could develop into that. Maybe with potentially, presumably better talent at Notre Dame, he'll be able to show that. But the key here for Alabama is that, and I said in the video, Bama has won in the past without elite quarterbacks. You look at Greg McElroy, you look at A.J. McCarron, you look at Blake Sims, you look at Jake Coker. All of those guys were not super talented, but they won. And why did they win? Because they had a great running game, they had a great defense, and Bama was able to just find a way to win without asking those guys to do too much. And they won plenty of national titles, had a lot of success with those guys, and the quarterbacks weren't even super talented. Today, though, is going to test that theory in this day and age. And I know it's only like 10 to 15 years since those quarterbacks played, but now you can't rely on the run game like you used to. Iowa is proving that when you talk about that Iowa just runs the football all the time and they can't win more than 8-9 games in the Big Ten. But Bama changed their style to be more of a passing attack. And their quarterbacks have reflected that. You look at Tua, you look at Bryce Young. Yeah, they could run a little bit, but they were elite passers as well. Tyler Buchner's going to have to be better than Jake Coker. He's going to have to be better than Blake Sims if Alabama's going to be a great team this year. But to win this game, I don't know if Tyler Buchner's going to have to be that great. Why? Because it's a week 2 game. So, again, neither team is really going to be potentially that polished. It's at night in Bryant-Denny Stadium. So, Texas is going to have to go on the road. The Longhorns are going to have to play perfect to win, potentially in this game. Their defense is going to have to shut down Alabama. It's going to have to be a lower scoring game to win. I don't think Texas can get a shootout here. The thing about Texas, and to your point, like you said, Austin, you don't want to use the refs as an excuse. But like Hummus Hero said right here, Young Shin was down. I mean, they kind of tilted the game. Not going to go about tilting the game, but, blah, blah, blah. But to your point, Hummus Hero, there was a bad call in that game. I agree. That was probably a safety. Texas would have won that game because it was only a 1-point win for Bama. But the thing is that game, Texas had a shot because it was a low-scoring game. Texas's defense was able to not allow Bryce Young to go for a lot, and they weren't putting up a lot of points. If Alabama gets in a rhythm here and they get to like 30 points, Texas isn't winning here. I just don't see it. Maybe somehow Texas offense is that great, but Quinn Ewers, outside of that Alabama game, which a lot of times quarterbacks do give their best shot against Alabama. You look at Texas A&M, some of the quarterbacks that they've had that played against, the Crimson Tide. You talk about Zach Calzada. No one even talks about him anymore, but he gave Bama his best shot. And A&M was able to win in 2021 at the end. You talk about Kellen Mond. They didn't win much, I don't think maybe even ever, but they gave Bama great games. Kellen Mond was a solid quarterback, but not elite. And that's A&M. But you talk about Texas here. They don't need, Quinn Ewers to be fantastic to beat Bama. Bama can be beat, by quarterbacks that aren't elite. As long as Quinn Ewers is mistake-free, which is something he was not last year. He made a lot of mistakes. There were a lot of picks. He can't throw interceptions in this game because if you throw interceptions and you give Alabama free possessions, you give Bama more chances to score, that crowd's going to get engaged. It's over. You're not going to have a shot. But the reason why this is a top important game is because Texas is potentially going to be the best team in the Big 12. Alabama is going to be a college football playoff contender. And it's also one of the top non-conference games as well. And it's going to be a future conference game. So those storylines are going to be through the roof. I hope it's a great game. I'm leaning Bama as well right now because Texas just has too many question marks. Everyone's really going with Bama. Hummus here said I picked Bama at home, and they know what to expect this time. The Ohio State says Bama will beat Texas by double digits. Troy V says this one. I do have questions about Bama's quarterback, though, which I do as well with Tyler Buchner. Looking forward to the game to see how these teams look, but I don't think he's going to have to play perfect to win. Jackson's excited about the Texas Bama game. He says, although I wonder if Texas were to beat Bama, we hear that Texas is back, baby. Yeah, I mean, they would. They would for sure. And then you talk about Jeff's comment, Roll Tide will win. So everybody's basically going Bama. So, I mean, it is what it is for Texas on, all of our picks. But I do think that the Longhorns will have a shot if Ewers does play a mistake-free game. But regardless, it should be a great game that everyone is looking forward to.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jeffrey. And as we segue in, I know Connor's in the chat. Connor, you're going to love number 5, good buddy. Take it away, Jeffrey.
On to our number 5 game. We are back in the pack. The Pac-12. In the last season where it's complete, you got USC, you've got UCLA still. The conference is looking great for this year, but you've got the Northwest rivalry. You talk about Washington State, the Apple Cup. You talk about Oregon State, the Civil War. I don't think it's called that anymore, but still the Civil War. You talk about, those are, great rivalries. But this game here is underrated. Doesn't have a name. Doesn't really have a name. But Oregon and Washington are two teams that do not like each other. And they play really, really hard every single year. And it sometimes is a better game than Oregon State and Washington State. Even though Oregon State's been getting really good lately because the Beavers are actually back and playing pretty well. Not back like Texas, but they're playing really, really well, like 0-1 Oregon State. But I think that this game you put on there the Pac-12's best. The Pac-12's best could be any of like 4 or 5 teams, but you never know. This could be the Pac-12's best. I would agree that with talking about the Pac-12's best, that these two teams have the two, potentially top quarterbacks in the nation based off of experience, not actual top talent, because people will say that's Caleb Williams or maybe Drake May. Maybe they're more talented, but Bo Nix and Michael Penix are experienced quarterbacks. They've been in college football for 5 years now, both of them playing a lot of football. You talk about Penix in Indiana, now Washington. You talk about Bo Nix, Auburn, and Oregon. So this is the Pac-12's most experienced quarterback battle. It's a Week 7 game, so both teams are going to be selling in the season. This should be a great game. What are your thoughts on this one?
Now last year, this was the game Washington won because I believe the tide turned in this game, and we could see something similar to this. Was Oregon went for it on 4th and 2 or 4th and 1, I believe, and they didn't get it because Bo Nix got hurt the previous play, and he came back in and they tried to pitch it to the running back, and Washington wasn't having none of it, and that turned turn this game on its head, and Washington was able to win, and after this game, everyone, including myself, was like, "Oh, Washington's something for real," because up to that point, Washington hadn't played nobody that we thought were they could be college football playoff contenders, But and then when Washington beats Oregon, it's like, okay, can Caleb DeBoer and Penix, have they finally put Washington back in that contention of, hey, we're here. We're going to compete for the Pac-12. It's no longer going to be Utah, USC, Oregon, and then maybe UCLA if Chip Kelly ever decides to recruit. Great offensive mind, but just can't recruit. But anywho, this game here, I could see this being like last year's game. I could see this being a shootout this time in Washington. I could see it being a 45-38, 41-38 kind of game. I don't expect no defense to be played here. We could all be wrong, and this could be a 6-3 Oregon win for all we know. And then everyone will be like, oh, well, we weren't expecting that. But right now, this to me is going to come down to the quarterbacks, like you said, Jeffrey, because SEC fans remember Bo Nix at Auburn had his good moments, he had his great moments, and then he had his not-so moments where he'd be trying to break a sack and throw it sidearm to the defender, and it's a pick six going back the other way, or he just throws up in the air and says, oh, screw it, my receiver will be down there somewhere, and then it's a pick and it's going back the other way, or just not holding on to the ball. Michael Penix, like you said earlier with the Utah one, got injured in Indiana, and, then he had to come back and earn his reputation back. And now, can he be protected? Because Oregon's D-line is sometimes suspect, especially against Georgia's O-line, which Georgia had one of the best O-lines the last couple years, so that's a bad example. But the thing with this is, I believe this is going to be, like most Pac-12 games, is going to be who has the ball last or who makes the first mistake. If I had to lean one way right now, I'm going to lean Washington. I feel like they do it again, and we don't know the conditions either. It could be snowing by this point because it's in Week 7, raining, we just don't know. But I feel like Penix will outduel Bo Nix, and I feel like Washington, this will be a game that they win, and it'll help build their resume towards the Pac-12 title game and possibly CFP contention. What do you think, Jeffrey? Where are you at on this game, and where are you leaning?
Well, I think it's, like to your point, it's great to bring up the fact that Bo Nix, how inconsistent he is, or particularly was, especially at Auburn. To me, I always compared Sean Clifford and Bo Nix. to be very similar because they were both, quarterbacks that were capable of running the ball. They don't have like the biggest arm and they make a lot of errors, just poor throws. But then every now and then they can wow you with just a ridiculous play. I think Bo Nix is more electric than Sean Clifford, and I believe that at Auburn, but he didn't, to me, show it as much. But now that he was at Oregon this past season, he's moved up in a lot of people's minds on actually being a good quarterback, actually being a better quarterback than people really thought before, because he had a really good year last year at Oregon, and that Georgia game. You want to talk about a week one overreaction? That is the definition of a week one overreaction. That game, I kept bringing it up so much last year, even as the season was going. The more it went along, the more I talked about it. I'm like, this is not the Oregon team that got beat like 59-3 against Georgia in week one. Yeah, that was an embarrassment for Oregon, but you talk about the fact Georgia already knew Bo Nix. He was with a new team. That was just an awful game for the Ducks. But they turned it around. They had a good season. I mean, maybe they fell a bit short of where Duck fans were wanting and hoping for because Oregon, was actually able to, what's the word? They were able to push their trajectory north and give fans hope they can make the Pac-12 title game. Something that after that Georgia game, no Oregon Duck fan had any idea that they would even do that. But they were starting, to move up the ladder. They were starting to actually join that, quartet of teams at the top of the Pac-12, Oregon, Washington, Utah, and USC, and playing good football. But the problem is this game's at Washington. And you never want to just side with the home team, right out of the gate, say, oh, well, the game's at Washington, they're going to win. Because then that just it does sound like a cop-out answer, but like you guys are saying in chat, you guys are absolutely correct. You talk about Hummus Hero's comment. He says the Washington-Oregon game is always an electric atmosphere no matter which stadium. I completely agree. A couple of you guys had that comment about the stadium for both teams. I mean, it's 100% correct. I mean, Washington has a great home crowd, and then Oregon has a great home crowd. So it doesn't matter either way. But it's at Washington, and I feel like Oregon is a team that's shown that they can win on the road more than a team like Utah. But I just trust Washington here a bit. I just feel like, again, Oregon, they got a solid defense, but Penix was able to get it done last year and it was at Oregon. You just feel like he's going to get it done again. Again, it feels like a cop-out answer because it's at Washington, but I really like the Huskies this year. I feel like that they have a great chance to be a great team. Like any other team, an injury could happen to Penix. Hopefully that don't happen, or something else could happen. It's just they don't have a good season. But as of now, coming into this year, I really do think Washington will have a great season, and I would have to lean their way. Oregon is going to get everything they've got because they lost last year. Revenge is a sweet thing. Oregon's going to try hard, I'm sure, to win the game. Mm-hmm. But I would have to lean Washington. But whoever wins this game is going to set themselves up nicely to potentially make the Pac-12 title game and potentially the CFP if they can only lose one game. But the Pac-12 is going to be tough, so going to be really, really hard on lose.
As the headline says, the Pac-12's best. These are the two best in the Pac-12, arguably. And then you throw in the others, Utah, USC, and then Oregon State, and then UCLA. So you just never know.
It's crazy for sure. The Pac-12 should be as electric as this game will be next season. It should be awesome. Now, on to number 4, Austin, take it away. You've got Georgia at Tennessee. This was the only game, no spoiler, but I'm sure you guys already know this is the only game that we could put with Georgia on this list. Had to put them here, though, because Georgia's going to be in the conversation. And you guys had 18% of you guys said this was going to be the most important game for next season. Now, we've got it at number 4, so we do not think it's the most important game, but it should be really important.
Yes. Coming in at number 4, Georgia, Tennessee, the SEC East Showdown. Could this be the possible game that decides who plays in Atlanta in January? Very well could be, because Tennessee, going way back to our honorable mentions, if they beat Bama again, this is the game. Week 12, if they beat Alabama, and then they beat Georgia, who stands in their way? This is one of those games where if Tennessee wins, there's no roadblocks left unless, South Carolina or someone else decides to be a roadblock. Oh, heavens. I know Tennessee fans out there don't want that hurt, but we know how that goes. Even poor Jeffrey up there in North Carolina with Georgia Tech and the drop touchdowns. Anywho, everybody's experienced it. But in Georgia, they're the defending national champs. Can they make it 3 in a row? Are they a dynasty in the making? Have they officially thrown Nick Saban off his throne? We shall see. But what do you think, Jeffrey? Which way are you leaning for this game? And what are some keys that you're looking at as we have this at number 4?
Yeah, I mean, looking at Georgia, I mean, they're obviously the team everyone's talking about because they've won the last 2 titles. They've been dominant. I mean, they've proved that they could, you can't say dethrone Alabama, but they're the top team in college football right now, as of exactly right now. Not, maybe the standard, if you want to talk about the team that everyone wants to be, that's still Alabama because of what they have done for so long. But Georgia has taken that title of the top team right now in this short period of time. But it's a new era. No more Stetson Bennett. But the thing about Georgia is this goes back to the Alabama argument with Tyler Buchner. Tyler Buchner doesn't have to be great for Alabama to have a lot of success as long as the rest of the team is doing their part and helping them out. And whoever's the quarterback for Georgia, I think it's going to be Carson Beck, I would think, but I'm not 100% sure. It could be one of the other guys. But when you talk about Georgia and someone talking about, their new quarterback is going to be really key for the Bulldogs to be able to maybe three-peat. I think the biggest thing Georgia needs is just a quarterback that's mistake-free, and then the rest of the team is as good as it was last year. Now, if Georgia's team is not as good around, the defense, the receiving core, the offensive line, the running, all that kind of stuff is not as good as it was last year, then Georgia's going to have some problems. They might still make the CFP even if they don't win this game. It will be tougher for them to do that because then they'd have to win, the SEC title game to get in, because if they lost that game with 2 losses, they probably would be on the outside because their schedule is a little bit weaker, and the fact that it's never good to lose the title game because that's, your last game. And if you're losing that second game there, it just isn't, the best thing overall. But I do think that Georgia, to be able to win this game, they don't need Carson Beck to be that great. They just don't. I think that all they need is the defense to shut down Tennessee, because you saw what Tennessee could do last year with Hendon Hooker. I mean, Tennessee beat Alabama because of the offense. It wasn't defense. The offense was incredible. Yeah, you had the one fumble Alabama had, and it messed them up, and Tennessee won. You could say off that, but Tennessee's offense allowed them to stay in the game. So I think that Georgia's defense is going to have to shut down Tennessee by a decent amount. Yeah, they're going to have a new quarterback too, whether it's going to be Joe Milton, or someone else. But, the freshman that they have as well. But I think that Georgia can drop this game. So it's a very important game because Georgia can drop this game to make the playoff. And Tennessee, they need this game because if we're assuming that Alabama beats Tennessee, which is not a given. They could lose. Alabama could lose to Tennessee. But just say, for the sake of this argument, Tennessee does. Tennessee has to win this game or they're done. They're not going to have a shot. So it makes stakes really high for both teams. This is a very important game. It should be a great game because it's in Rocky Top. It's in Knoxville. Neyland is going to be just insane, just like it was for Bama. Maybe not as insane as it was for Bama because it's Bama. You can't beat, the third Saturday in October. But this game's going to be huge too because Tennessee fans, they want to prove that they're not a fluke. It wasn't one season where they were really good. So they're going to be loud and proud this year as well. So Georgia, it's not going to be a slam dunk for them to win this game. But their defense, if Carson Beck is not playing super well, or whoever's quarterback for Georgia, their defense is going to have to bail them out here. But I think that it's going to be a great game. If I had to lean, I would probably barely lean Georgia right now, just because I feel like Georgia's defense is still going to be really solid like it's been the last few years, but it's not by much because Tennessee has the potential to find a way to win, especially because it's in Neyland.
Yes, and I would like to bring up. I know in the chat, there were some questions of, did Tennessee fix that awful defense? That's a great point. You know, we saw last year, you know, they were able to beat Bama. It wasn't because of their defense, like you said, Jeffrey. It just happened to be one of those nights where whoever had the ball last wins, or whoever made the first mistake would lose that game, and it happened to be Bama. And, you know, which Bama's defense didn't do any favors either by letting Jalen Hyatt just run wide open down the field, for crying out loud, which that's another big key piece that's gone. Now, who does Tennessee have on that offensive side? And Cedric Tillman's not there anymore. Those are two guys that could stretch that defense. Now that they're gone, Tennessee's going to have to fill that. And can Joe Milton, I'm not going to say can Joe Milton be Hendon Hooker alike, but can he at least be decent? Can he be game manager, so to speak? Not like try to light up the scoreboard and try to throw for 500 yards, have like 4 picks and 4 touchdowns. Can he just make the nice execution throws? Can he, have an efficient game, have somewhere in the ballpark of 2 touchdowns and a pick maybe, or 3 touchdowns, no picks, somewhere in that ballpark? And I know what you're thinking. Georgia's defense, last year with that explosive Tennessee offense, basically took them and pulled them apart like a chicken wing. And it could very well happen again this year. Just like you said up top, Jeffrey, Beck may not even have to make big plays because the defense could once again pick them apart like a chicken wing, and it could be all but over by the fourth quarter. But if I had to lean one way right now, it is in Rocky Top. It's not in Athens. But I still think Georgia's on that quest for the three-peat. I just think Georgia's defense is just going to be a little too much. And like, the biggest concern with me is, can Tennessee stop anybody? Not just Georgia, but can they stop the Ole Misses of the world and the Kentuckys and the Vandies? That I know they did last year, but, there's still questions there. Right now, I'm going to lean Georgia. It's hard to doubt against them at the moment, but as we go along, that could change. But right now, I'm leaning Georgia as we sit today. What about, I know, Jeffrey, you said you were leaning Georgia. Is there any additional things you would like to add about this game?
Yeah, I think you made a great point when you talk about, looking at Tennessee. They don't have Hyatt anymore. The offense is not going to have maybe as many weapons, to help out Milton as Hooker had. And yes, Milton looked really good when he played against Clemson. But like you said, I agree with you. Milton doesn't have to be great to win. Neither does Carson Beck or whoever's starting quarterback for Georgia. Both these quarterbacks in this game, all they have to do is play mistake-free. Whoever plays mistake-free could win. And like you said, it's in Rocky Top, which makes you want to pick Tennessee so badly. But Georgia's defense is going to be the key here, because last year, when Tennessee, when the playoff committee had them as the number 1 team, remember that Tennessee was ranked number 1, and Georgia fans were like, "Oh no, we're number 1. It's not Tennessee." And then the defense just shut down the Volunteers. Hooker couldn't do anything. That was his worst game of the year, and it wasn't his fault. He just had no chance. And if Georgia's defense is that good again against Tennessee, and it isn't Rocky Top, but defense travels more than offense usually. And it's going to be very hard for Tennessee to put up easy points in this game. And if Milton makes a couple mistakes, could be game over. Plus, the other thing is Tennessee has to play Alabama first. They've got a couple of somewhat tough games for this. Georgia's schedule, to put it kindly, is not hard. It's not great. It's not one of
Jeffrey.
the toughest schedules in the country. And I know that it sounds hypocritical to say that because when you're a team like Georgia and you're so good, to say they have an easy schedule, it's just because they're a good team. If Georgia was a 6-6 team, their schedule would be hard because they're not able to beat these teams. It's not the teams they're playing are bad, but Tennessee's schedule is harder than Georgia's. So if Georgia's undefeated, it could help them out for this game because they might not be as tired or banged up or whatever. But they also could not be tested either. So that could be a detriment.
Jeffrey, let's be honest here, Jeffrey. We could throw you out there, quarterback, good buddy, with that schedule, and you win all those games. I don't think it would take. I bet we could throw someone from the audience out there at quarterback, and it'll be easy to win those games. Ball State? Who are we kidding? I mean, I know, like where are the Clemsons of the world and the Texas? Why ain't Georgia playing some of them? But I guess we're not in charge of that.
Yeah, their non-conference schedule for this season is just unbelievably easy. I mean, they start out the 2023 season with Tennessee Martin, then they have Ball State, and then after they play South Carolina, then they've got UAB in the non-conference, and then obviously Georgia Tech. That is just an astronomically easy non-conference schedule for the presumably top team in college football for the third straight season. I know they're supposed to play Oklahoma. That got canceled. It is what it is. Oklahoma's going to be a future conference opponent. But I will say, though, and Humacero literally just said, I said it right before it came up, Georgia OU scheduled. Like you said, you're absolutely right, Humacero. But obviously that game got taken off. But the key for Georgia, though, is I will say this. They need to take advantage of this last season, though. If they're going to three-peat, this is the year. Because the schedule's going to get worse. Because once 2024 comes, you add Texas, Oklahoma, and you don't have the East and West, and it's just all these schedules that are just mushed together that they're doing, just like with the Big Ten. This is the last year where Georgia's – it's not a cakewalk, but their schedule is a lot friendlier than some of the other top teams in the sport. Even Bama's got a tougher schedule because they're in the West. Georgia has to take advantage of this season because it's going to get a lot worse from here. A lot harder with them playing more teams from the West and Texas, Oklahoma added. But Georgia, Tennessee should be a great game. It's going to decide a lot. See both teams potentially being in the playoff discussion. Probably a more important game for Tennessee. If Georgia just wins out the rest of their games, they'll get in even if they lose this one. But I am still going to lean Georgia just like you are as well. But still a really important game. Now on to number 3. The final Pac-12 game. You've got Utah, USC. Take it away, Austin. What are you feeling on this game?
Number 3, Utah at USC. The epic regular season rematch. And it's going to take place in Week 8, this time in Trojan Land at the Coliseum. And as I said earlier, no spoilers, but this right here last year was the game of the year. This game delivered more than I ever thought it would. I'll be honest with you, I was expecting USC to kind of to beat them because they were banged up, heading into that game Utah was, and I was kind of expecting, USC's on a roll. This is, Lincoln Riley's got the success going great. Things aren't looking good for Utah, and then USC's defense happens. And then Dalton Kincaid, they just couldn't cover him all night. It just seemed like every throw that Cam Rising made, Dalton Kincaid was wide open, like, oh, okay, here you go, Dalton, take off. And, but Caleb Williams had the answer. Every time Utah scored, USC scored. And it was like a pinball machine. Now, the interesting thing that a lot of people, including myself, made the interesting point on is the 2-point conversion at the end. It's one of those things, and Jeffrey, in plenty of your videos and plenty of these live streams, you've made the point as well. If you go for 2 and you get it, you're a brilliant offensive mind. What a genius! But if you don't get it, you stink. You need to be fired ASAP. Which, here's my thing with that. I get it if you're in one of those shootout games. I understand why you go for 2 because you don't want to have to play overtime. You're already exhausted. You've already almost thrown your entire playbook at them, and you're like, what do I have left to offer? Like, at this point, we'll be basically running vanilla offense, or and it's like you just don't know. So that was one of those ones where he got it and people were praising him and saying that was the right call. But what happens if he doesn't get that? Obviously, USC wins the game, but are people calling for the offensive coordinator's head? Are they saying Cam Rising's a bad quarterback? He can't win the big one? Because if you remember, last year, week 1, the goal line pick, that would have been another thing to make people say, oh, Cam Rising, big-time game, where's he at? Made another stupid decision. What do you think on that, Jeffrey? On that 2-point conversion? Would you have gone for it in that situation? If you're the head coach and you're calling in that play, would you have done that? Or would you have played for the overtime?
I mean, I think like the biggest thing about that, I mean, you talk about like momentum's a big thing. And like if you feel like the momentum's on your side at that given moment, sometimes you got to do it. I mean, I personally like kicking the extra point better just because of the fact that it's the safer pick. Yes, it can get blocked. Yes, you can miss the extra point, still lose the game, but I would prefer to do that. So, I mean, if I was the coach, I probably would kick the extra point. But in that situation, I don't blame Kyle Whittingham for going for it because at that particular point, the way USC was playing on offense, Utah needed to win it there. Same thing with LSU versus Bama. So don't blame his decision, but I probably wouldn't have done it. But that's what I would do if I was a coach. But to your point about that, to go off your point about, coaches, it like you said that I say, if you go for 2 and you get it, you're a genius. And if you go for 2 and you don't get it, then you should be fired. I mean, that's where we are now. I mean, it's the same thing with going for on 4th down, 4th and 1. If you get it, wow, you're a genius. If you don't get it, you're insane. Same thing with faking a punt or whatever and all that. It's like even in the NBA, you had Joe Mazzulla and the Boston Celtics. If they lose to the Miami Heat, he should be fired. If Eric Spoelstra loses to the Celtics after being up 3-0, he should be fired.
Yeah.
He's been a long tenured coach. That's just where we are at right now. Everybody's going to overreact over a play or a game and say someone should be fired. Unfortunately, you can't avoid that. I mean, it is what it is. I don't blame Kyle Whittingham for, going for 2. They got it. They won the game, and that opened people back up to Utah after they lost to Florida. That game got Utah, presumably back on the map again after they kind of were slipping a bit because they lost to UCLA, I think, as well before the USC game. It was at UCLA. They had 2 losses. They were barely ranked, and that game was huge for Utah. And I think I picked Utah to beat USC, if I recall, because it wasn't Rice-Eccles, and it's just a different place. That is a ridiculously loud place, tough place to play. Utah is so much more inspired at home. And the problem, though, is this game. Go ahead.
Sorry about that, but I would like to point out as we talk about this, let's keep in mind Utah's been the team the last 2 years. You remember what they did to Oregon? They beat them in the regular season, and then all the Oregon fans were saying, "Oh, we're going to get them this time. We're at a neutral site. We're going to win this game." And Utah said, "Okay, slap, slap, slap." Okay. Then USC after this game. And, USC, the USC people we know and love, and all the USC fans, they were like, oh, when we get to Vegas, it's going to be a different story. It's not going to be in Rice-Eccles. And what happens? I get it, Caleb Williams got hurt, but guess what? Utah was still like, okay, this ain't no problem. Slap, slap, slap. And they're back-to-back Pac-12 champions. Great accomplishment. So that's one thing to take into consideration. Utah has been the team to do this more than once. And could it happen this year? I'll let Jeffrey tell you up top.
Yeah, and to your point, the segue I was going to about saying that, those games were at Utah. You talk about the Oregon game in 2021 in the regular season, the 2022 USC game, 2-point conversion at Utah. Both those games were at Utah. And like you said about being in the Pac-12 title game, it wasn't going to be in Rice-Eccles. Could they win? Utah won those games because, especially with USC, Caleb Williams got hurt. They still won, still impressive. But neutral site with the title game, it's 50-50. This game's at USC. And that's what makes this a completely different animal, because you look at the fact that Utah lost at UCLA last year. And that was a game that I thought Utah would win because UCLA was good. But to me, they were a tier below the top 4 teams in USC, Utah, Oregon, and Washington. Utah lost that game. And this game here is at USC. And I know USC's defense, if it's as bad as last year, then you would think Utah would find a way to get this one done again because of the defense. But USC, according to a lot of USC fans, and based off the transfers and recruiting, their defense should improve. They still have their defensive coordinator. They haven't fired him, or anything like that, or got a new defensive coordinator. A lot of people are not, on his train or his bandwagon. Alex Grinch, he's a defensive coordinator. I mean, I don't know whether, some people say he's not the best fit at defense, for USC. I don't know. I think part of it was personnel, because USC has a lot better players on offense and defense. Maybe with better defensive players, that will help Alex Grinch out and will save his job and actually have USC in a position to win these type games to make the playoff, maybe win a title. But if USC's defense is like last year, I think Utah wins. If USC's defense is a little bit better, I'm going USC because this game's at, the Trojans. It's in California. Utah just does not win these type games on the road very often like this. So if I had to guess, I lean USC. I want to pick Utah so bad because they've been so good. Kyle Whittingham is a great coach, and he finds ways to win with less talent. And they've even been getting more talent lately because he's how good he is. But this game, just in the Coliseum, USC, it's going to be really tough for Utah to get this one done. I have to lean USC. And the only way they lose USC is if their defense is really, really, really bad.
Now, I'm going to agree with you, Jeffrey. And here's my big reasoning why. They have a gauntlet at a schedule in the Pac-12 because they have to play Oregon, Washington, and USC. Do I believe Utah can win all 3? Sure. There's been, you just never know sometimes. Maybe they do run the gauntlet. And if they do and go unbeaten, they very well should be in the playoffs. There should be no questions, no arguments from anybody whether or not they should be there. But I was leaning Utah against Washington. Here, I agree with Jeffrey. I'm leaning USC. Because I don't believe that they can win 2 out of 3, but to win all 3, that's an extremely tough. Especially since 2 out of the 3 are not in Rice-Eccles. Because they got to go at Washington, at USC, but Oregon comes to them, which helps them out. But I'm right now leaning USC. But as we go along, this is in week 8. This is the week after Washington. Could there be possible letdown as well? We don't know. It just all depends. But right now I'm leaning USC. Jeffrey, if you would please, my good sir, let's go to number 2. And I know, spoiler alert, Bama fans are going to love this one.
Yeah, they definitely will for sure. Last thing on this game, and then we'll definitely move on to number 2. But the last thing is again, Utah, like you said, tough schedule. And that could go 2 ways. You could say tough schedule, could help, sharpen you, make you better, and they'll be ready for a game like this. But it could also weaken you, get injuries can pile up, and then you aren't able to win. So it could go 1 or 2 ways, but we both agree leaning USC, even though Utah should give them a great game. Both teams will be in the Pac-12 title discussion for sure. A lot on the line, a lot of stakes for this game. Should be awesome, just like last year. But like Austin said, you've got the number 2 game. Some people probably would disagree with this pick because A&M didn't make a bowl game last year. How is this the number 2 game if A&M didn't make a bowl game? Well, Alabama, obviously, they are self-explanatory. They've been one of the top teams in college football, year in and year out for almost 2 decades, and that's self-explanatory. A&M is a talented team. They've got talent. They always have had talent with Jimbo Fisher. That's not the problem. Will they be a playoff team, or a potential playoff team? Maybe not. But Alabama and Texas A&M the last couple years has been just an incredible game. You talk about 2021, great game. 2022, great game. Even though A&M blew it at the end, and you can make an argument neither team really played that well at all, and Alabama found a way to win that one at home. But if A&M's better, which they should be better, even if they're just an 8-4, 9-3 team. This is early on in the season still. It's still week 6 where you could, if A&M actually is better, maybe they're undefeated or with one loss. There's still technically, you would say, be in the playoff discussion. And, Alabama, you talk about that they have to be on this list, you would think, twice because of how impactful that their schedule is in their games. We didn't put LSU or Tennessee on the list because Alabama was at home, and they usually find a way to win their home games more than likely. But this game's at Kyle Field, the 12th man, tough place to play. Alabama's had some struggles there. This isn't going to be a slam dunk. I mean, if I had to pick right now, it's hard to go against Bama. It just is, because it's Alabama, and A&M has been, struggling the last couple of years. But you can't overlook A&M. You just can't, because they always give Alabama
now.
Pressure. What is your thoughts on this game, Austin?
Now, I want to pose a question to my lovely co-host up there, Jeffrey, and to the chat out there. Do we think this game, in terms of importance, could be Jimbo's biggest game? If he doesn't win this, his seat could be on fire a little bit, like you're cooking hamburgers on the grill. Could get a little hot. What do we think?
I mean, that's a great question. I mean, it's all going to come down to how badly A&M wants Jimbo gone, because his buyout's ridiculous. I mean, his buyout is like $75-80 million still. And if A&M fires, I mean, maybe they, can find a way to get that lowered to $40 million, $30 million, and say, Jimbo, you could take this and, let's move on. You get half the money and we'll go to a new coach. I don't know if that's what would happen. But I do think that this you don't want to call it Jimbo's last stand, but if he doesn't win this game, it's becoming more and more likely that Jimbo will be fired eventually, even if it's not now because of the buyout or whatever. Mm-hmm. He will eventually get fired. I don't think that this game saves his job either, because 2 years ago they won this game.
Yeah.
In 2021, they already beat Bama, and it hasn't really changed much. The key for A&M, it's like you said with Texas. You said about Texas can beat Bama, but then if they just blow it against like Kansas or TCU or whatever, then it just ruins what you've done. If A&M wins this game, but then next week they lose to South Carolina or whoever's next on the schedule, you just throw it out of the team. It doesn't matter. It cancels this game out. You have to win these type games to help you set yourself up to make the playoff, to make the SEC title game, which is where A&M fans want to be, which is where they should be based off the recruiting rankings. Winning this game isn't going to save his job. Losing this game isn't going to lose him his job. It would help if he won, but if they win this game, he's going to have to follow that up with wins. Because if I recall, and my memory might be wrong, but if I do recall, in 2021 when they won this game, the next week A&M lost to Mississippi State. And Mississippi State was they were not a bad team, and rest in peace to Mike Leach. Mike Leach was a really good coach. But if A&M's beating Alabama, they should have beat Mississippi State. And they didn't. And they lost that game, and they lost a couple other games they should have won, and it completely erased that Bama win.
I do want to make the point that, like you said, Jeffrey, which this is not only not try to single Texas A&M out, but you look at a lot of teams that we've done this, that we've put on this list, that could go for a lot, but especially, like you said, A&M, because let's say they do win this game for the sake of this argument, and then they have someone like Missouri, and then Missouri comes in and just absolutely beats them 42-10, and it's like, you beat Bama, but then you blow it and give up 42 points to Missouri. No offense, Missouri fans, no offense, but You're no Bama, not yet. You could get there. Who knows? But anyway, it's just one of those things. It's like you said, if he beats them, does it save his job? Maybe for another year or two, but like you said, the follow-up's going to be really important. Which, no spoiler alerts, Jim Harbaugh, for instance, was always criticized. Oh, you can't beat Michigan. I mean, Michigan State, you can't beat Ohio State. It's time for you to go. It's time for us to get a new head coach. And then he beats Michigan State, and then it's like, oh, okay, he's beat Michigan State. Now we need you to beat the team up north because we're sick and tired of them bragging. We're sick of them Buckeyes. They suck. They need to go away. Yeah. And then they finally won the game. And then he won it again. And people were like, oh, Jim Harbaugh's taking over. But that's not the game in hand. Jimbo is kind of like Jim Harbaugh alike because of Alabama. He wins it and then he doesn't win for another 3 years. And it's like, oh, it's time for Jimbo to go. The only thing that's saving Jimbo, like you said, Jeffrey, is his buyout's ridiculous. $70 million? What's he going to do with all that money? Go buy another house? I mean, we would all love to have $70 million, but we don't get that. But back to this game, way too off there. But back to this game. It's in Aggie land. More than likely, I think this will be a night game. I know this is TBT, so it's still to be determined. But most of the time, they put this at night because Texas A&M at night has an awesome crowd. They have an awesome night crowd. They're one place. They have a great night crowd, whether they're good or bad. Especially since the big boys are coming to town, meaning Bama, can get very interesting real quick. But it's hard to bet against arguably the GOAT of head coaching, Nick Saban. Right now, I would lean Alabama at the moment. But my mind could be changed as we get closer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to further your point about you talked about, with A&M and following it up and all that, it creates an interesting argument before we move on to number one about teams that win all the games they're supposed to but can't beat the big teams versus teams that can beat the big team but then can't beat the team that they should beat. Penn State's perfect example. Last year, Penn State did everything right? They beat every single team that they played, in the Big Ten. Doesn't matter if it was, Purdue. It doesn't matter if it's Indiana. It doesn't matter who they played. Michigan State, they beat them all. They beat Utah in the bowl game. So, Penn State did everything right, but then they lost to Ohio State and Michigan. So Penn State fans are upset. You're not beating the big teams. But what if Penn State beat Ohio State and Michigan, but then lost to Indiana, and then they lost to Michigan State, lost to Rutgers? I mean, would they be satisfied with that? Probably not, because how do you beat this team? You can't beat this team. It creates an interesting dynamic because A&M, again, is the opposite. A&M has beaten some big teams, specifically Alabama in 2021, but then they completely just fall apart and lose to teams that they shouldn't lose to. And it's irritating for Aggie fans. But it's like, would you rather beat Bama and then choke in these other games, or would you rather lose to Bama but win the rest of them? Me personally, I would rather lose to the team that you want to beat badly, even though you want to beat them, but win the rest of them, because at least if you win the rest of them, you did what you were supposed to do. Maybe that's boring, but you don't want to beat Alabama if you're A&M and then lose next week, whoever you're playing. You just don't want to do it because it erases it. Penn State had a good season last year despite not beating the two teams they want to beat. There's nothing wrong with their season. A&M needs to find a way to, even if they win this game, but beat Missouri, beat Vanderbilt, beat Arkansas, and beat South Carolina. Can't lose to those teams.
And the final point I would love to make is to put this in its proper context. So we've hammered down the championship at CFP. You also got to keep in mind, we also said New Year's 6. So maybe if you're Texas A&M, you could also look at it as, hey, you know what? If we do lose this game, and we do what we're supposed to do and go 10-2, we could still play in the Cotton Bowl. We could still play in the Sugar Bowl, which are great, fantastic New Year's Six games. It's the stuff of legends. I mean, everybody remembers the 2013 Sugar Bowl, Louisville, Florida, when we beat the Gators. But I digress. But that's just one of those things that's not all about the championship, but it is. But there's also New Year's Six, and maybe that could be A&M's goal. If we beat Bama, we could still, even if we do lose 2 games that we should really not be losing, like Vanderbilt or Missouri, losing those, we could still make a New Year's Six. That's still a successful season, and Jimbo can get more money than he needs. But yeah, that's my final take on that. And Jeffrey, let's introduce. Should be a great game, but introduce number 1. I think they know, but introduce it.
You've got Ohio State at Michigan, the game. It's usually, in a lot of people's mind, the biggest game of the year. But for our list this year, we've got this game as number 1. And it's because not only is it, to a lot of people, the best rivalry, but this year's version of this game is going to have a lot of implications because of the fact that you talk about Ohio State lost in the shoe last year. 2021, they lost to Michigan. That was unthinkable. Inconceivable, as some people remember that reference from a movie a long time ago. Inconceivable that Ohio State could lose to Michigan back then, but it was at, Michigan. But then they lost at home. Now it's back at Michigan. So if Michigan is as good as people think that they should be again, then they're probably going to be favored here. They could be undefeated. They might not be. Who knows? But they probably will be favored in this game. Will Ohio State, we talk about Georgia three-peating, winning the national title. Will Ohio State lose 3 in a row to Michigan? Will they? I mean, that would be insane. I mean, looking at it on paper, I know that it's not just a quarterback position, but Michigan's got the experienced quarterback. McCarthy, J.J. McCarthy, played all year last year. Ohio State, new quarterback. Same thing with Georgia. Don't know who's going to be the quarterback. It's not going to be easy to replace C.J. Stroud. It's just not going to be easy whatsoever. But you do have Marvin Harrison. That's going to help out whoever starts at quarterback. Marvin Harrison is fantastic. You saw the difference with Ohio State when he got knocked out of the Georgia game. And then you talk about Ohio State's defense. They've got talented players like always. Their defense could maybe take another step forward.
Mm-hmm.
But this is going to be a really interesting game. I'll let you go further into this game if you want to before I make my prediction, because there's a lot to unpack here with this one. But what are your thoughts?
So this honestly has become the story of dominance. Who runs the Big Ten? That's the thing. Because that's the thing that I've heard amongst Michigan Ohio State fans. Ohio State has claimed dominance for the longest time. And even Mark Rogers over at the Voice of College Football has claimed that they have owned the Big Ten for quite a while, until Michigan finally stepped up and took the reins, so to speak. But some Ohio State fans are saying, you're not quite there yet because we've won the conference 5 straight years. You did back-to-back. That's great, but you're not on our level yet. And my question is, for those Ohio State fans and for fans in general, if you beat a team back-to-back and win your conference back-to-back, does that not qualify as taking the reins, so to speak?
Mm-hmm.
Because back-to-back's pretty impressive, don't get me wrong. But I just want your thoughts on that, Jeffrey, of that kind of argument.
I mean, yeah, it's like Georgia, if they win 3 in the third championship, 3 in a row. I mean, that they're definitively now the top team in the sport for now. And you talk about, this game here, if Michigan wins another time, I mean, it's like they're taking control of the Big Ten. Even if it's just temporarily, maybe Ohio State will regain it back. But this is a big game for Ohio State. I mean, they've been the standard in the Big Ten. They've been the most dominant team in the Big Ten for the majority of the last 80 years. They've had some down years, had some down times. They've been the team. Michigan has always to Ohio State's point, they always want to point out you're second fiddle to us. Well, Michigan has done a great job, and if they win again, that would be a huge step for them. But before we get all the way into our further thoughts and who we pick, we're way behind on the comments, and there is some fantastic comments here to get to. I got to read some of these. Hummus Hero says Georgia's schedule could actually get back to haunt them if they sleepwalk and never get truly tested. They might not respond well after they inevitably get punched in the mouth come December. Great point, because you talk about the schedule. I mean, that's another argument. You can say, well, tough schedule can help get you prepared for these tough games, but it can also wear you down. Easy schedule might not get you prepared, but it also can make it where you don't have as many injuries. That's an interesting argument. You are absolutely correct there, Hummus Hero. Is Hummus Hero, or Troy V. Hummus Hero says Bam and LSU tested early and often. I agree with you as well, Hummus Hero, just like with Troy V's comment. You guys are nailing these comments for sure. Jeff says Roll Tide will win. He's very confident. Got the Bama logo on. They're very confident there. Hummus Hero says Alex Grinch would be the best fit for JV field hockey team, I think.
Oh, goodness.
That is priceless right there. I mean, hey, it's completely different sport than what he's currently coaching, but hey, maybe a change of pace would work for him. And then Troy V's got this classic one. A&M is what comes up when I look up underachiever in the dictionary. I mean, that's a good one.
Now, here's the thing. Where does Miami classify in all this? Because Jeffrey, they're the preseason national champions every year, including this year and last year, and even during the COVID season, they were the preseason national champions now because the U's back, baby. We're back to the glory days. So what are they in the dictionary? They're A&M's underachiever.
I mean, underachiever, overhyped. I mean, I don't know. Either word will work. Miami and A&M are very similar, and they play again this year, just like they did last year. The battle of the underachievers or the overhyped. I mean, whatever you want to say. Maybe eventually they'll be really good, like they should be with the talent that they have. Troy V also says Jimbo is to do something to improve because he's become a national joke. Ever since the title in 2013, Jimbo has been downhill. Hopefully for him, he can get it back on track. Troy V also said team down south because I think you mentioned Michigan trying to beat the team up north, and Michigan is the team up north. That was a good one. That's a good one, Troy V. That's a good one. That's cool you caught that one. Tim Prangley says USC Washington. We didn't have that one on there, but that would have made it really Pac-12 heavy. We could throw that in the honorable mentions, Tim. That's going to be another great game for sure. Hummus Hero said didn't make our list. Just so many great games for sure. It's just too tough to put them all. And Troy V says that we had Utah, USC. Tim also says
at number 3.
Tim also says for USC, the biggest games in conference are Washington, Oregon, Utah, UCLA, and then the rest. I can agree with that. Makes sense. And Troy V says as well, they're not paying Jimbo a King's ransom to win a New Year's Six game. They pay him that because they thought he'd get them a natty. I mean, these are just, you guys are killing it. This is great. And Tim also, we're doing an entire schedule slide Notre Dame in at 3. This is good. Tim knew what I was talking about. The Princess Bride. Did I just admit that? Yes. Inconceivable from the Princess Bride. Yeah, that's funny. That's funny, Tim. I'm surprised you knew. Well, I mean, I'm not too surprised, but that's funny. Troy says, I got the Buckeyes winning going away in this game. Michigan's already looking past them, sound cocky, just like they were against TCU. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, if Michigan is cocky, then Ohio State can win, and maybe their fury can help them get over the top, Troy. You never know. And then they're talking about some grandpa rap here with Tim. I don't know. You guys are funny. But so I guess to wrap up here, let's get to our final thoughts on this game. You guys are killing it in chat. I really appreciate you guys for being here. Like the stream down below. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new. You guys are the best. This game is the game. It's going to be the top game in the sport. Looking for, potentially this year. It should be the top game in the sport this year. Who are you ultimately picking based off of right now anyway, like looking at these two teams? Do you believe Ohio State's going to find revenge, or will Michigan find a way to win 3 in a row?
Now, this, Jeffrey, I know this is a bad cop-out, but I can't decide a winner right now. I have to see something. I know this is a bad cop-out. I know the Ohio State, Michigan fans, and all of our people in the chat are going to be saying that's a bad cop-out. I'm sorry. I just can't pick a winner right now. In all seriousness, this is a 50-50 game still because you've also got Ohio State with their schedule. They could already have lost 2 games by now. And, I get the meaning of this rivalry is it doesn't matter if both are under 500, this game still means everything, which it should, just like it does with North Carolina Duke. It always delivers. College basketball plug. Watch your television, kids.
We've got everything. We've got the Princess Bride plugs. We've got college basketball plugs. We've got Alex Grinch plug. We got everything.
But, yes, I'm 50-50 on this game because you can make an argument that both teams need to win this game. You can't point out and say, oh, Michigan has to win this or Ohio State has to win this. They both have to win this because if you do not beat one or the other, it's considered a failure because the last 2 years, Ohio State fans have said, this sucks. This is a failure. And it's like, you only lost that one game. But still, we lost to Michigan. Out of all teams that we lost to Michigan. Why couldn't we have lost to Illinois or Iowa or Penn State or lost to Indiana for crying out loud? Another plug for you, good buddy. But
oh man,
first
loss.
This is the game.
Break the internet.
Yes. But this is a game both teams want to win and they think that they have to win, which you should go in that mindset. But right now, I'm 50-50. What about you, Jeffrey? Your final thoughts? Are you going to be like me and go 50-50?
I mean, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. But, I mean, realistically, though, you could go either way. Ohio State, this is revenge year. Michigan could be riding high, a little cocky. Maybe, Ohio State's figured out McCarthy this time around, and they get the job done. But then you look at Michigan's, they've got the more experienced quarterback. They've got Blake Corum back, and they've got a good running back room. They've got good defensive players still, and Ohio State's got an unproven quarterback room and a secondary that can get exposed at times. I could see it going either way. It's crazy. I could really see it going either way, but right now, I'm basically about 50-50, but it's not definitive. I'm leaning this way, but I would almost feel like Ohio State might find a way this time. I just don't know if they're going to lose 3 times in a row to the team they don't. I don't know. I'm about 50-50 though, but maybe like 50.1% Ohio State, just by like 0.001.
Jeffrey, these Ohio State Michigan fans are going to come after us all over the place. YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, all over the place. How could you not pick one way or the other? It's not 50-50. It's one way or the other.
It's pick Michigan, Ohio State fan. We got Ohio State fans in chat. You guys are awesome, man. And then it's like if you pick Ohio State, Michigan fans are like, which we don't currently have any in chat, but it's like, how could you? Either way you go, the 2 fan bases are going to disagree with whoever you pick. It doesn't matter what you do.
Rich, this is what we love about college football. This is the game that we love, but it's just hard to pick this game. It's like going through our list, it's just like most of these games you lean one way or the other. This is one of those games where you truly are like, flip a coin if you have to, because there's also the chance of, schedules and everything else. And this is late in the year. This is last week of the regular season. This is just everything all bundled into one. It's like you're making a burger. You got the burger cooking and the bun with the cheese and the onions and the pickles and the mayonnaise. You got it all cooking. You just never know. But it's just one of those things.
But that's why it's the game after all. And, it's going to have playoff implications, Big Ten title implications, rivalry implications. It's all going to be a big deal for both teams. It's the last week of the regular season, like always. It should be a lot of fun. Big noon kickoff on Fox. You're going to have Joel Klatt, Gus Johnson. Can't beat it. It's going to be great.
Yeah. And Before we wrap up,
Mm-hmm.
I've got two things that I want to ask the chat and you, Jeffrey. Out of the 10 games that we picked, which game do you believe will be our sleeper game, and what game do you think will be a game of the year candidate as we sit tonight before we go?
I mean, that's a great question. I mean, like you mentioned, Alabama, Tennessee, theoretically, you can make an argument was the game of the year, or Alabama, LSU for that matter, whichever one. I mean, either game was, fantastic. There was other good games as well from, other conferences that were great, like Utah, USC. If you want to say that was a game of the year, it just depends on like if you're going off just how great the game was, or you're talking about the implications that it had. Whichever way you're looking at it. But, I mean, looking at our top 10 games, I mean, Ohio State, Michigan could be the best game. It could be the game of the year. But last year, it wasn't really the game of the year. Yeah, it had implications for the playoff. Both teams did end up making the playoff, but the game wasn't really good. You would talk about being close. It was a great game, obviously, for Michigan fans, but it wasn't a good game that it was close and it went down to the wire. So if you're talking about like that, who knows whether Ohio State Michigan will be the best game in that regard. But for implications, it's probably going to be the game of the year. That's why we have it at 1. But, I mean, the game that could be the best, I mean, Georgia, Tennessee could be that good. It could be. If Tennessee lives
Utah, USC.
Utah, USC. Oregon, Washington could be just as good as last year. I mean, almost any of these
games. I honestly think, though, if someone was to tell me to pick one right now, I say Utah USC runs it back again. I think we get the same exact game this time in Trojan Land. Except this time, I think USC wins this time around.
Mm-hmm. I think you want to talk about a sleeper game. A sleeper game could be Ohio State Notre Dame, or it could be Florida State Clemson. Either of those games. They're at the bottom of the list, but they could end up being better than we think. It could be even better.
Yes. I agree with you, Jeffrey. That was going to be my sleeper game, Florida State Clemson. And then, but my other sleeper game may surprise people, but Alabama Texas. That's my other sleeper, because if this was in Texas, it would be a viable, oh yeah, that could be a game of the year candidate, or this could be a game. But if Texas shows up in Alabama, people can be surprised by that and be like, oh, Bama's actually in for something tonight. And they may win, but people may say, Texas is for real. They might actually be back, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. But, I mean, I think, like, to your point and my points that we both made on these games, any of these games could really be the game of the year or the sleeper game. That all these games could be great. That's why they're on the list.
Jeffrey, Tim's back at it again. He's got USC beating Utah by 17. He's out here making bold
by 17. He's got them blowing them out. Well, I mean, it's not like technically like blowout, but very comfortable win there.
Tim, you are a very confident Trojan. I will say that. I mean, Utah's been the team to beat you twice, and they did it to Oregon, so I respect your opinion, but I don't think 17. That's pushing it. I could see 10.
Well, Tim, I appreciate it. He says, so good to see my man Austin again. Always blessed to see Jeff. Really appreciate that, Tim. It's nice to see you in chat. Really, really, really appreciate it. Jackson as well. Austin, Jeffrey, you're the best of the best in the business. Appreciate the compliment as well, Jackson. But
so Tim says
I have to agree with Austin, though. I think it will be a close game. I do. A closer game.
Tim says we ought to trust him, Jeffrey. Trust him, Grasshopper. I wish you were here when we got the USC Utah, but Jeffrey made a good point. If USC doesn't fix their defense, then we could see another game like that. Like you said, Jeffrey.
We're about to wrap up, but I put the StreamYard link in chat for a couple minutes. If you do want to come on, Tim. If you don't, no big deal. But definitely it's getting late. But we've had a lot of fun. We're about to be wrapping up. But these games were all, like I said, really fun to talk about. It's just scratching the itch on how, the season's getting closer, and we cannot wait for the football season. to come around the corner and get back here again. It's going to be awesome. The NFL as well. We didn't talk about that, obviously, but NFL and college football, it is going to be awesome coming around the corner. So many great games. 10 pointing out again. You gentlemen need to understand that Utah doesn't play on the Coliseum. Well, that's why I lean USC. If you didn't hear my earlier, but I did say that I think, USC being at home, I mean, that's going to help them because Utah, they've done a lot better at home at Rice-Eccles. That's when they beat USC. That's when they beat Oregon. That's where the Utes do their damage is at home. When they're on the road, they lose to Florida. They lose to USC. They almost lost to Washington State last year. They struggle more on the road. They're much better at home, like a lot of teams, but they seem a lot more drastic.
In which, when you rewind the tape later, if you have to go back and watch it, me and Jeffrey both leaned USC, but there was also a great comment brought up that this may harden Utah too because they play Washington the week before, and then they go to USC. So they've already got one road test under their belt, and then when they come to the Coliseum, they could be pumped up, ready to play. And Utah, bless their heart, but they have a rough schedule.
Hi, Tim. I'm glad that you were able to watch tonight, getting back in the swing of things, talking college football. But I'm sure that you have plenty of thoughts on USC. So,
no, I mean, listen, I'm having a great time. You guys are doing a great job breaking down all the games. And I think it's natural for you to look backwards last year and think that that's the defense USC is going to field this year. I mean, it's you're going off the reference that you have, but what you guys have to realize is in the offseason, Lincoln Riley did realize that defense was bad. It was a huge improvement, believe it or not, over the defense we had the previous year, which I will tell you right now, in all the years I've been watching USC, that was absolutely the worst. I mean, and there's no hyperbole here. The worst defense I've ever watched the USC field on the Coliseum. I mean, Oregon State was a great team, but they truly looked like Nebraska 95 against that defense. And left, right, up the middle, they could do whatever they wanted to do back in 2021. 2022, a lot of you guys don't realize is early on they did well. They actually played well. The problem is that when you're razor thin, the injuries, football's a game of attrition, and you can't have a really good starting 11. You do need to have those pieces for a number of reasons. One, you need depth. So if you have some depth, you can give those guys some reps off. You can get them the breaks they didn't. And so what happened was that Shane Lee broke his hand or his wrist. Sorry, I had to sneeze. Shane Lee breaks his wrist. He plays I don't know if you guys noticed it, but he played a cast the last 5 games of the season. Eric Gentry went down with a sprained ankle in that Utah game we talked about. The game was in Salt Lake City, and the Muss, which is like their student section, is very loud. They're an awesome environment, great crowd. The other thing to realize when you play at Rice-Eccles, you're playing at altitude. I mean, up there, thin air and everything. And that takes a toll on you. It was a close game, you guys. It came down to the wire, and those USC guys were gassed, where the Utes are always practicing at that altitude, so they have a slight advantage. That's why if you look at the Utes, their home record is much better than their road record. And so traditionally when they come to the Coliseum, they haven't played as well. That's the way it's gone. And I'm not going to rehash the championship game, but USC was up 17-3, actually 17-4. They were up 14, I believe nothing. Or was it 14-3? I can't remember. One of the two when Caleb Williams pulled his hamstring. Mm-hmm. And then they settled for a field goal and they were up 17-3. And then for 3 straight series, he couldn't do anything. And even on one leg, he actually kept them that game all the way. I believe it was a 4-point game in the fourth quarter. People forget all this stuff. That's with Caleb on one leg. My hat off to the Utes. They beat the Trojans. The score is what it is. They were 2-0 last year. Hats off to them. But a couple of things. Completely different defense. You guys probably don't know this, but they brought in Bear Alexander. He's a 4-star, but he should have been a 5-star. Not many true freshmen play on Kirby Smart's defensive line, if any. And he did. When they had stars go down, he came in. He was the first off the bench, true freshman. Then you have Mason Cobb, who's led the Cowboys, the Oklahoma State Cowboys in tackling. I think like 96 tackles. Dude is a tackling machine. He's going to be at middle linebacker. We're going to slide Gentry, who's now healthy, over to Will. I can go on and on. Damani Jackson was a 5-star, was out last year with the ACL tour. He's back. Strong safety Branch, not Zachariah Branch, but his older brother, I always forget, Zion Branch, is back. He was a top 50 player. He's now a sophomore and healthy. You guys are going to see a defense that's totally different from last year. I'm not going to bore you guys going down all the details, but when I say I'm confident about USC and winning by 17, book it. You guys, I'll come out here and eat my crow if we don't win by 17. If you guys see that line around 7 or 8 where I think it's going to be, you jump that crap and you'll go make some money, because you will make some money.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with everything you said, Tim. I mean, you talk about, I think I referenced it, maybe Austin did as well, but I did say that USC's defense has to be better. I mean, there's no way that it's going to be the same level. I mean,
Yes.
how improved it's going to be, I don't know, but it's going to be better. And I picked, leaned anyway. Well, we weren't really picking the games, but I leaned USC to beat Utah because, like you said, Utah's not as good of a road team by a long shot. And, USC, they're a team that at home, they usually win, fairly comfortably over most teams. I mean, they're a good home team. Most teams are anyway in college football. They have great home environments, which USC does. I'm confident USC will beat Utah more than likely. But like you said, they could win by 17. Who knows? They definitely could.
Which I would like to acknowledge that I did point out, I think you did as well, Jeffrey, that Caleb Williams did get hurt in the championship game, which I think we both ended up saying that flipped that game on its head, because USC more than likely could win that game if he doesn't get hurt. Like you mentioned, Tim.
He was up 17. They were up 17-3 and they were rolling. The Utes were reeling. That injury, I mean, if you remember, he got hurt on like a 63-yard rushing play. Like they were back on the doorstep getting ready. Well, he took a couple because he got hurt. They took 2 consecutive sacks and had a set for a field goal. And then on the next 2 drives, they couldn't do anything. And the guy was, I don't know if you guys ever pulled a hamstring before, but it is painful and it's a pain in the ass. Now, clearly, there's levels, right? There's severity, just like a sprain. It's like a lot of things. There's different levels, degrees of a pull or a hamstring pull. And it was on the moderate side. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't light. So he literally was just kind of limping and running around up there on one leg. And to think that didn't have any difference in it, I'm just going to tell you, it truly did.
And the other thing that I would like to bring up is the first regular season meeting, which I had stated was the game of the year in my book, because USC and Utah's offenses were trading back and forth. I know in that game there was some referee interference, but at the end of the day, Utah goes down, scores, goes for 2, wins, and then that puts Utah back on the trajectory of, oh, this team is really good. They can compete with USC, the team that could score a bunch of points. Because up to that point, people didn't think Utah could keep up with USC's offense, especially if their defense wasn't playing their best. That was a big question mark. And then when we saw that game and they were able to keep up with Caleb Williams and company, people started to take their offense legitimate again. And especially Cam Wright. Oh, go ahead, Tim.
No, you're right. I didn't mean to cut you off. I thought you were done. No, yeah, you're right. You cannot count out a Cam. Look, the last thing I want to stare down the barrel of is Cam Rising for a 2-point conversion at the goal line when the game's on the line. That guy's a gamer. He's a running quarterback, man. He doesn't have the greatest arm in the world, but he's a playmaker. Think of a guy like a Vince Young or something like that, right? Where he plays breakdown, he's gonna hurt you with his legs. He's not a little guy; he's a big guy. He'll run toe to toe with linebackers. Sometimes he gets the worst of it, like happened in that game. Actually, he got lit up pretty hard in that game, going against a linebacker. But he has that ability. They did keep up a score with this, but you got to remember there were 2 drives. One of them led directly to a touchdown. There was an interception thrown in the end zone. They called roughing the passer, which was literally the biggest patty cake I've ever seen in my entire life. It is what it is. The refs threw a flag there. That helped them to score 7 points where they're probably not even they're probably not even in field goal range. They're probably going for it on 4th and long or punting. And then on
Tim, can I say one thing real quick? Not to interrupt you, but one thing real quick. You talk about there was a bad roughing the passer call. I remember that it was pretty bad, but I still don't think anything was as bad as the roughing the passer they called against. I think it was the Atlanta Falcons against the Tampa Bay Bucks. That they sacked Tom Brady, and they really didn't even touch him.
Yeah,
down. That was the worst roughing the passer I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, no, I mean it's painful to watch too because matter of fact, it was Kalen Bullock made a beautiful play, an interception in the end zone. There, bam, there's right there. That's 7 points. When the team wins by 1 point on a 2-point conversion, that's a big play, and there's plenty of games. And I honestly don't think, even in that game, I know I'm gonna sound like a homer, that game should have been that close. There was some sloppy tackling, sloppy play, and I'm hoping that the additions they have, like I was breaking it down for you guys a little. Oh, by the way, going back to the USC thing at playing at the Coliseum, until 2021, where we had interim coach and basically the wheels were just off that thing. It was a complete dumpster fire at that point. They did beat USC in 2021 in the Coliseum, but that was like the team had given up. We lost to Cal as well, which was a team that was really worse, and that no one really cared about the rest of that season. We had an interim coach. That team was a mess.
Terrible game.
But other than that one game, Utah has never beaten USC. Never in, I don't know, like at least see, like maybe like 10 attempts, they've never beaten USC at the Coliseum. So I'm just trying to tell you guys that they don't play well, and I believe they lost to UCLA. They don't travel well to California. That's why I'm telling you that they're going to lay a woodshed to them. And you got to remember, you guys, who beat them twice last year and kept them out of the playoffs? Do you really think this team's going to take their foot off the gas against these guys? I don't think they're going to. That's why they win by 17.
And also the biggest question is that the other point I was gonna make is a lot of people still have questions: is Cam Rising a big game player? Because they always go back to that Florida game. It was really that USC game that really made people realize, oh, Cam Rising can deliver the goods. Just can he do it more often than not? And then once he did it against USC and then continued to do it, people were like, okay, Cam Rising is legit. He is for real. He's not a guy that is a Tony Romo of the NFL that just chokes away the game completely. He is a guy that can win the big game.
Two things with him: the way he plays, he gets injured. If you look at how they did against Penn State in the bowl game, it's because he just doesn't know when to get down. He thinks he's a big guy, and he gets knocked out of games a lot. So that's one hit against him. And then, like you just said, at home at Rice Eccles is a totally different game. But when he goes on the road to the Swamp, that throw into double cover, I mean, the guy was blanket double. I don't even know how you didn't see that gator and just threw it right to him. That was just a bad throw. It was like second down too, right? Wasn't it? I think it was like second down. It wasn't even a third down or fourth down play. He tried to squeeze it in there. Yeah, there was no reason to make that throw.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, Tim. That was a bad throw for sure. But again, as always reference, it was week 1. And week 1 is completely different than the rest of the season. I always reference Georgia-Clemson. Georgia beat Clemson 16-10. People said Georgia's offense wasn't very good, and then they win the national title, and they have a great offense by the end of the season. So, week 1 does not determine everything. But you are right. Cam Rising can make mistakes, and his play style does get him hurt. I agree 100%. Now, one question for all of you guys before we get off. I really appreciate you for coming on, Tim, and Jackson as well. I'm sorry you haven't said anything yet, Jackson.
Oh, that's all right. Thank you for having me on, Jeffrey.
You're welcome, but I appreciate you being here. But
anytime.
Do you like our list, Tim and Jackson? Do you mine and Austin's list? Do you agree with most of the top 10 selections?
Yeah, I like it. It's fantastic, man.
Yeah, no, your list is solid. I would move. I just think that there are some. I do think that game, even though it's also in the Coliseum, with the defense that Washington has and just the firepower with the receivers and you have Penix there with Odunze and I always forget, dude. I love this guy and I forget his name every time.
I always remember Odunze too, but I can't remember the other one.
I literally could see his face right now. I never remember his name, but he could stretch the field. They're going to put up points on. I think USC's defense is vastly improved. That's gonna be that shootout. That's gonna be the game you're talking about. You saw last year in Rice Eccles. Get ready for the same exact game in the Coliseum with Michael Penix lighting up the defense. And it's not because I don't think USC's defense vastly improved. I just have that much respect for their offense.
Yeah, November 4th is looking really good. I mean, you got like Bama, LSU, USC, Washington, Clemson, Notre Dame, and what may be the final edition of the Bedlam. Well, it's the final edition of the Bedlam in the Big 12. But that's going to be a great date to remember, November 4th.
And I would like to preface this when we put our list together. Tim, to your point, USC has a lot of fantastic games, but we looked at it, and the Pac-12 would have taken up majority of our list if we would have put all the Pac-12 on there because it's so even. Like the Pac-12 is wide open; anybody can win it out there. Your guys can win it down in California. Utah can win it again. Oregon or Washington, maybe even Oregon State shows up and wins it. Who knows? It was just hard to weed it out. So we kind of put the two games that we thought would be the most important in the Pac-12 or three.
Yeah,
it's a good list.
Not to give away the spoilers on it, but we were doing the list pretty late, and I was like half asleep, so I was just like, yeah, Austin, that's it.
You guys, it's a really solid list. I'm just nitpicking. I think I just happen to know a lot more about the games you're talking about, and I'm just saying I could listen. We don't know, right? This is what's so fun about the summer and the going into the fall. It hasn't been kicked off yet. I'm really high on USC's offense. You may very well be right. That for all we know, the best game might be Oregon State, who I think is going to be a shocker to everybody. They got a really good team this year. Great offensive line. DJ can get it moving. The Civil War, the Oregon State game might be the best game in the Pac-12 all year. Who knows? Maybe USC's defense hasn't been improved. I can't see it, but that game may not be used. It's fun to do these lists because you don't know, right? We're going off of what we know from last year. Might be trying to see who lost who, and maybe who picked up who. But the short story is, if you ask me, it's that Utah game is not going to be close. But USC going to, I think it should be only one. I think it should be one game. I do think USC be included, but I think of the game that listed at the top there, I think the game up in Autzen, that might be just cool for its own reasons. But as far as the two best teams in the Pac-12, I think heads and shoulders, Washington and USC, and that should be a hell of a shootout.
Oh man, that looks like a 55-52 game right there.
Oh no, hold on. I do think USC's defense. So I'm gonna say this. I do think USC's defense is going to be vastly improved. Meaning they're like 100 and like I think 104th in yards per play. I think they bring that at probably somewhere in the 40s, right? So they'll be like mid 40s, I think, and that will be good enough for them to get into with that offense. It'll be good enough for them to get into the playoffs. That said, Washington has one of the more proven from last year, and then who they've lost. One of the better secondaries and linebackers, I think, in the country, as well as their rush end is I don't know you call him a rush end, I think I'm a defensive end. But that guy, pass rusher, is legit, and he'll be in the backfield all day. I don't think that they score in the 50s. This game will not be in the 50s. This game will be something like I'm thinking this game is gonna be like if I give you, I'd say probably 35-33 kind of game. That's what I'm thinking this game's going to end up being.
That's going to be cool, man. I'm looking forward to it.
To your point, Tim, I completely agree with you when you said that the season hasn't even started, and that's why me and Austin were not really giving any official predictions, because I mean this is banter time. I love it. I mean before the season starts, it doesn't matter. Everyone's having fun. We're getting closer and closer, and it's just so cool. Me and Austin able to do this stream tonight. It was great. It's like the first time we're really deep diving back into college football, and I mean it's gonna get more and more anticipation as we get closer, and it's awesome. It was a lot of fun talking to you guys.
Well, let's see. It's 50 days now until week 0. That means we're gonna see USC play some San Jose State. That's gonna be amazing.
Yeah, that's gonna be a white knuckler. Yeah.
Oh man, Notre Dame Navy. That's gonna be on, and I think Vanderbilt is on there as well. Then it's going to be a 55.
You're not selling week 1 very well here, by the way. It's week 0, by the way.
Then we got 55 days until week 1 and 57 days until week 1 Saturday.
Mm-hmm. And I would love to say, Tim, in favor of your Trojans, me and Jeffrey had several USC games that we could have put on here. We were almost going to put Notre Dame USC on here as well, but the thing that worries us with Notre Dame is if they lose to Ohio State, and then that could turn everything on its head again, and then Notre Dame could be playing for nothing again, other than just moral rights to beating USC.
Well, that Notre Dame game's either going to be, again, like I just said, a 35-32 coin toss game, right? Who knows? Or USC's going to blow the doors off them. I honestly think that. I honestly believe that's one of those two things is going to happen. I'm not sold on their offensive coordinator whatsoever. I think that, but it is Notre Dame. It is in Notre Dame Stadium. It's in South Bend. So, and it's a rivalry game. If I know one thing about USC Notre Dame, anything can happen. So I'm be glad if USC can get out of South Bend with a victory, I'll be more than happy. And by the way, Buckeye fans, I know Troy V's still out there, or if Hummus, but same thing, man. You just want to escape that place and get out there with a victory because weird stuff happens there.
Yeah, weird stuff does happen there, like Marshall and Stanford finding a way to win. That was weird.
Yeah, year one. I mean, you do have to do year one.
Yeah.
Not everyone can have it going on like TCU and just play lights out from start to finish. Year one is year one, and rosters are again, it's all up. It really. The head coaches get all the credit, right? But we all know you guys know a hell of a lot about sports. It's the assistant coaches and the coordinators really that are important, and you gotta say that what they've lost at Notre Dame is kind of suspect, and that's why I think last year was so bumpy. I'm hoping they've got it figured out, but losing Tommy Rees, I mean, I know that Will's happy to see him go, but having an unproven tight end position coach being elevated to your offensive coordinator because you lost your offensive coordinator late in the cycle, doesn't bode well to me. Actually, that's got to be worrying for the Irish.
Yeah, I agree with you, Tim. Oh, go ahead, Jackson. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Well, the fact that Notre Dame missed out on Andy Ludwig from Utah, that was proven right there.
The Ludwig went nowhere, right? He stayed. He stayed, correct? At Utah?
Yeah, he stayed at Utah. Yeah,
I think I don't think Ludwig was. It's not that Notre Dame missed out on anything. Ludwig just played Utah to get paid, and he was probably grossly underpaid. So good for him. He wasn't going anywhere.
Yeah, Tim. To your point, I was definitely joking on the weird things happening with South Bend joke. I mean, yes, Notre Dame is a tough place to play. It was year one, and I definitely respect Notre Dame football. They've got a great history, and that I'm sure the USC and Ohio State games will be great at Notre Dame. But to your point, the other thing you said about the assistant coaches, 100%. Indiana football was good when they had obviously Michael Penix, but they had Kane Womack at defensive coordinator and Kalen DeBoer at offensive coordinator. Yeah. And where are they at? Washington, Kalen DeBoer after he went to Fresno State, now at Washington, and then Kane Womack to South Alabama. Both are doing great. Now Indiana football can't win because they're gone. So I agree with you. The assistant coaches do matter. They really, really do.
Yeah, very astute. Yep, you're on it. I fully agree with you. Absolutely.
And Tim, one quick thing before we end it. I made a joke, just being funny, and Jeffrey thought that would be a good idea, not to spoil any.
I'm gonna go back and watch. I'm gonna go back and watch this, Austin. You better be careful. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
No. So the joke I made is that important games. I said TCU Colorado jokingly because of primetime, because primetime's getting all the hype. He's on every must-watch game, and then Jeffrey commented and said, basically, he's not there yet, which is true. He's not there yet. There is things out there that people say that he could make a Lincoln Riley turnaround, take him to a New Year's Six and all that, but the great desire to believe that he'll at least take him to a bowl this year, if nothing else. That was the joke I made.
No, that's gonna be an absolute woodshed game. They're gonna get obliterated by even though TCU has lost some people. Sonny Dykes is gonna absolutely just crush that defense. It's gonna be horrible. It's gonna be horrifying. Hide the children. Definitely cover their eyes at the very least. There's the problem is as much as I rip on USC in 2021 and the defense really in 2021, there were pieces. He took over a Colorado as bad as USC. That was a bad USC team, but Colorado would take that talent on that USC team in 2021 all days and twice on Sunday. And if Deion had that kind of core nucleus of guys and had the ability to maybe dump 15 to 20 or 30 guys, there's kind of really should not be on that roster and bring in maybe some of his guys like he did. Then they'd be in a position to turn it around. I want to pretend like Lincoln Riley is just some magician. And by the way, in my opinion, after what I saw that roster was and what he's done with it in 2 years, the man is absolutely a genius. And all the people over there and Norman need to really, really look at themselves in the mirror, because I think that they're in for a big surprise over next year as well. People talk about they're going to win like 9-10 games. If they win that many games, it's going to be because of their schedule. Because I'm telling you right now, what Lincoln Riley did and what Lincoln Riley would have continued to do as they go into the SEC, they're in for a rude awakening. Because I am so happy with him, what he's done to this roster in just 2 years to get us ready for the Big Ten. I would have been crapping myself if Clay Helton was bringing us into the Big Ten. It would have been like lambs to the slaughter. But what's been done with this front seven is nothing short of a miracle. I mean, we're talking, everyone. Bear Alexander gets all the big hype on everything, but in reality, there's also a guy named Anthony Lucas who was actually a 5-star. We did a big, huge A&M class. He's coming to SC. We got a guy named Kion Bars. He won't be here when we transition over to the Big Ten, but this guy is as a nose tackle, and he threw up the was it the 235? What do they do to the NFL Combine? Is it 235? Anyway, he did it 29 times. This guy.
Yeah.
And he's a monster. He's an absolute monster. So they've filled in the issues on defense. I mean, I think if you're a USC fan, you'd be pleasantly surprised. If you're a USC hater, you'd be like, oh shit. Because I'm telling you guys, when they don't have their crap together, we are a bad team. But when USC gets rolling, you got to look out. And I think that we're heading towards that lookout part.
Yeah, I mean, the USC definitely has the potential. I've said it before as well. If their defense improves, even like you said, 30s and 40s in the country, then they could be a national title team. They definitely could be, especially with the offense. Real quick, I got a question for both you, Tim, and Jackson. Like, I know it's so far out. Me and Austin were like 50-50 on, and I was like 50.001 with Ohio State. But early thoughts on Ohio State, Michigan. Do you lean in Michigan going for 3 in a row, or you think you more on Ohio State probably going to get it done for the first time in 3 years?
I think Michigan's 3 in a row.
Ooh, Jackson's going Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I'm probably gonna say the same, and here's the only reason why. Here's what gives me pause. By the way, I think the actual roster that on paper, the fact that Michigan's getting all their they're getting their backs back, they're getting their quarter. JJ McCarthy's back, right? Corum's back. Not all of that offensive line is back, by the way, but a good portion of it. And they have some big guys there. And let's face it, let's figure they're going to roll more linemen out there. So they're going to be solid as hell. And they've proven. But you're going to give the Buckeyes, they've got a lot of talent on that team. And you really don't know what's going to happen. What's their quarterback's name?
You talking about the quarterback in Michigan?
The quarterback, the Buckeyes' new quarterback.
Oh, and it Kyle McCord.
That's right, Kyle McCord, right? He's going to have an entire year to get ready.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if this was game 2, lights out, make it 3 in a row. But he has the entire year to get to become the captain, to get this team behind him and stuff. And we don't know, right? He's a wild card. He might be the greatest thing. You have these quarterbacks that come in, no one expects. Like Sam Darnold comes in, right, at USC in 2016. We're like, they had Max Williams, and we'll run Max Williams out there. But then Sam Darnold comes in and changes the trajectory of the entire program overnight.
Mm-hmm.
And, this Kyle McCord might come in and be that guy for the Buckeyes. They were a field goal away from winning the national championship last year. They lose one receiver. They lose Njigba, right? They got the rest of the guys.
Yeah, they lost Jack Smith and Njigba because he couldn't play. But Marvin Harrison getting knocked out of the game was the final blow.
Oh no, I mean Njigba, he's gone to the NFL this year. I'm sorry. Correct?
Yes, he's with Seattle.
Yeah, he's gone. Yeah, I was just referring. They should have beat Georgia more than likely. If
more than likely, yeah, you're right.
That's the age-old story there. But yeah, Smith and Jigba's gone, but like you said, everybody else is back. Yes.
Yo, Traveling Fools. Fools, you missed it. I had your sweatshirt on the other day. I can't remember what show it was on, but I was wearing it anyway.
Traveling Fools.
Appreciate you for stopping by, Traveling Fools.
So the Buckeyes. So I'm done. This is way too long, but. You guys been on for 2 hours, but if McCord can be that kind of a playmaker and difference, they have the pieces. You know, Troy B's gonna be mad at me. I forgot the running back's name now. I'm sorry. It's the offseason. I am losing it.
Yeah, me too. I've been focusing on NBA and college basketball so much that I can't even remember half of them. Henderson, TreVeyon Henderson.
TreVeyon Henderson. Thank you. So, and you got to remember, it's year 2 of the defense. You know, when I know I sound like a broken record when I say this, but it is. Even though we're moving into a new era of football, people got to realize it takes time to install your defense, right? So when you bring in Knowles and he comes in and says, "Oh, you know that Big 12 defense isn't going to work," well, maybe not. But in year 2, it's going to get better no matter what. It's good. It's going to be better. So you just got to think if it gets better. And if McCord can take that step, they have all the offensive guys in position. It's going to be a great game. So my answer after 30 minutes of rambling is I think that Michigan wins it again. Sorry, Troy.
Yeah.
They have the veterans.
Well, Tim, the thing with me was if you happen to see it, I was 50-50. I wasn't leaning one way or another because this game, the Michigan-Ohio State game is always important. Both teams want to win it. Both teams need to win it. It's kind of like USC, UCLA. Both teams want to win it. Both teams need to win it. UCLA more years than not, but I'm sure USC always wants to take those bragging rights home, whether they're a winning team or not. But it's just hard to predict those games.
You
go ahead.
Beat the Irish. You always want to beat the Irish, right? But you don't ever want to lose to the Bruins. That's the way it is. It's literally like that. And that's what we're talking about. Another rivalry game. You got the Wolverines and the Buckeyes playing. It's one of those things where, you know, it just could be anybody that wins this game, regardless of the records, and throw it all out and stuff. I think the difference is going to be here is I think that there's going to be a veteran group coming back from Michigan, and with one mission, they got embarrassed in the playoffs. I think they have a chip on their shoulder, but the more talented roster is going to be Ohio State, and if they can put together, and they got a whole year to do it, that's why I have no idea. But
yeah,
if you force me to, I'll say Michigan because I'm just being play it safe. Conservatively, Michigan will win again.
I mean, I'm with you guys. I'm like 50-50. I have no idea. I mean, I said 50.01, you know, just to say something. Ohio State, just because like you said, they're the more talented team. It's just I have a hard time seeing them losing again to Michigan. But you know, like you said, Tim, I mean, it's insane to say that Michigan is the safer pick, because I even said it to Austin, Michigan's going to be favored. I mean, if Michigan only has like one loss or they're undefeated, they will be favored in this game. So it's crazy that, you know, to use Princess Bride again, it would be inconceivable to think that, you know, that Michigan would be the safer pick or the favored team 3 years ago. Because, I mean, Harbaugh can't win. They'll never get it done. Now we're saying that Michigan's the safer pick. That just shows you how things can shift in a couple years in one team's direction.
Now,
it's crazy.
Now, the thing I want to ask Tim and Jackson before we head on out of here, because we've almost been live 3 hours, but this could
I knew it would.
This could kind of be.
Well, you asked me to come on.
It's all good, though. It's all good.
You know why, Tim? Because I like when you come on.
All right. Well, listen, I will time myself.
But
I'll save you both.
You're the best, man.
So Tim, I brought up the question to Jeffrey, and this is for you and Jackson as well. When do you consider a team to be dominant? because the old status quo for is they won 5 years in a row. The Big Ten was theirs. There was nobody in their way. Now Michigan's won back-to-back, and if they win a third year, they believe they could claim the dominance now. What do you think about that?
Well, I think one thing you'd look at is not just back to back; it's really how they've won. And unless Knowles can figure out how to defend that Michigan, it's what Jim does. Is what he did in the Pac-12 as well to USC. He goes huge, right? And you have these really fast and athletic 5-star guys that are awesome, and against a normal offense, they're good. But when you bring in like jumbo packages with 2, maybe even 3 tight ends, or the stuff he used to do was just amazing. You're like, what the hell? That's not going to work. And yeah, it worked. If Jim Knowles can figure out a way to stop that run game without going cover 0 goal line on them, then I think that it wouldn't be dominant. But if we see another year like we saw last year and they haven't figured out how to stop that run game, I'm going to say, yeah, it's dominance.
I love this from Traveling Fools. Miami's winning it all. You guys are wasting your breath. And then Troy V says Miami hasn't recovered from 2003.
Listen, Miami is going. You heard it here first. Miami's going 143-0 next year. And you can laugh now.
Inconceivable.
Fool's nose. Yeah, I'm sorry. Did I say 100? Sorry, it's a preseason. I got to keep it in double digits. Modern day. What the heck? Miami is going 63-0 next year. And you could laugh now, but you just wait till December next year, and we'll see who's laughing. Right, Fools?
This is awesome, man. This is so funny. But hey, I mean, Miami. I mean, they've had some moments. It's not like they've been completely bad since the early 2000s. They've had a couple of decent years, but yeah, I mean, they're very inconsistent. I mean, the talent that they get, they should not, be 5-7, 6-6. It's insane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well,
I told you, the Miami fans think they're going to win it every year. Almost worse than USC fans thinking they're going to win the Pac-12 everywhere.
Hey, at least when they lost to Middle Tennessee State, it didn't break them. I mean, they lost Middle Tennessee State, and they're still positive.
It's a shame USC is actually leaving the Pac-12 because those little guys up in AA Eugene up there, and was it? I think it's AAA. I think it's AAA Utah. These be USC's farm league. By the way, when we go to the Big Ten, we're going to call them up to the big leagues once in a while, get them out of the Mountain West. It's a shame that we're not hanging out there because I would have enjoyed hanging out with Lincoln Riley and pasting the Pac-12 for the next decade because it would have been truly glorious because these guys got all excited when Paul D and his merry band of misfits slapped those sanctions on USC. And then USC decided, you know what, we're going to double that. Now we're going to start self-sanctioning us. We're going to hire Clay Helton. And they got a nice picture. They had the entire conference given to them on a platter. And what could UCLA and Oregon do with that? Absolutely nothing.
Yeah,
that tells you all you need to know.
I agree with you on that for sure. You got Travel Fools 372-0 is our ceiling. And then Troy V, he says the ghost of Jimmy Johnson will carry them. That's impressive because Jimmy's still in the living category. Oh, man.
Oh, heck. Oh, heck. All right. We're going to get Troy and Traveling Fools a room because they're going to go at it.
I love it, man. It's been a great conversation. We're approaching 3 hours.
Well, thank you all for listening, guys. We're going to wrap it up here. No, just kidding. Go ahead. Sorry.
I appreciate. Hey, man, you can take over, Tim. You got it. You can wrap this up.
Take us home.
But we've been live for a while, but it was great. I mean, talking college football, we could talk for 24 hours like Mark does on the 24-hour stream before the season. I mean, you really could. College football is the best. You just can't beat it. Appreciate that, Travels. Love you guys. You guys are the best as well. Troy V, Travels, everyone else. Thank you so much, Tim and Jackson, for coming on as well. It's been so much fun talking to you guys. Probably don't know about doing any more, streams for football, before the season. Maybe some other topics we can come up with. Maybe me and Austin might do something again in the future. Who knows? But it was a lot of fun. And any final thoughts, guys, before we end it?
Oh, it's a pleasure to come on, you guys. Thanks for having me. And maybe we just get a shot clock for me. You guys put like a 30 seconds up there. And that's how long I had to come on for. That way I don't cause any trouble again.
Tim, we love you, and you could come on anytime, good buddy. We always need that USC perspective.
Yeah, the slant, you mean the USC slant?
Well, the completely unbiased USC talking points, completely unbiased.
123-0, baby.
Well, he's got to keep us in line, Jeffrey, because us little guys, Indiana and Louisville and North Carolina, we can get a little big for our heads. Tim's here from the USC perspective to make sure we don't get a big head.
You brought Jackson in. He's the guy with all the clout these days, not my school.
Yeah, this is who you're talking about. This is who you're talking about right
here. Yeah, those guys. You guys, do me a favor though, over at Alabama, figure out what your mascot is or who it is or what it is, because it gets confusing for the rest of us. We can't figure out the Crimson Tide. Then there's a elephant out there, and it's just all gets confusing for us.
Yeah. I mean, hey, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. My ancestors like Bama, but I can't explain it myself. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, that's hilarious. Lots of stuff you can talk about with college football. But thanks for coming on, everybody. It was great. Appreciate Troy V. Great show. Thanks, guys. Miami versus USC Natties is traveling fulls, taking it back to the 90s and 2000s. But we'll definitely be coming back again soon to talk some college football before the season. I'll have some preview videos for teams. As we keep going. I've already done a couple, but we'll definitely be doing some more before the season begins. But thanks for everyone for being here in the chat, and you guys that are here as well. It's been a lot of fun. And I'll see you guys next time.